Chapter 421. The Aftermath 1. The Demonic Sea. Shiskler Bay. Upon those vast, restless waters, where the waves never calmed and relentless storms lashed the sea with howling winds and dense fog, even though a long time had passed since the battle between the Empire and the Ultras, this place still bore the scars of that conflict. Lightning still cracked across the skies, striking down with fury, further stirring the turmoil below. Few dared venture near the bay when the sea raged like this. Not even the nightmare creatures dwelling in these waters. Yet, cutting through the raging waves was a single black ship, devoid of any flags or markings. Its origins unknown, but its crew carried names that shook the world. On an urgent mission to find Mikar Valerian and the others, this marked the 7th day of Vendrick's voyage through these treacherous seas. Standing at the ship's prow, clad in his usual tattered garb, Vendrick let the harsh winds whip through his disheveled hair. He remained silent, but those with him had long grown uneasy. None more so than Bladier, the high priest of the church. Draped in his pristine white robes, the archbishop scowled at the horizon. "We've been in this cursed place for days, yet found nothing but ourselves adrift in these god-forsaken waters. No enemies, no beasts, nothing." It was as if they'd stumbled into a place completely cut off from the rest of the world. Since entering Shiskler Bay, Vendrick's team hadn't encountered a single soul. There were many strange places in their world, but Vendrick knew well. This was no natural phenomenon. "It's a labyrinth." Those words, spoken by Mist Umbra, who materialized silently behind him, broke the tense silence. A labyrinth? The delegation from the church and the Shadow Court echoed in confusion, glancing at each other. Unlike Vendrick, Mist was generous enough to explain his thoughts. "It's a closed loop. You may not have noticed, but we've been sailing in circles ever since we entered these waters." He pointed toward a violent thunderstorm in the distance. "That's the 5th time we've passed that same storm." Realization slowly dawned on their faces as they started to grasp the situation. It was hard to notice such patterns when lost at sea with nothing but endless waves in every direction. But people like Mist, with sharp instincts, could piece the truth together. Vendrick, of course, had realized it long ago. A labyrinth spell. Vendrick spoke plainly. Having spent much of his life alongside Millicent, he was familiar with most of the world's magic. But the labyrinth they were caught in was on a whole other level. Nothing he had seen before compared to this. A massive spell covered the entirety of Shiskler Bay. A closed loop, keeping us trapped here, endlessly circling. Every time they neared the bay's edge, they inexplicably found themselves back at the beginning. Bladier frowned, his concern growing, placing all his hopes on Vendrick. "How do we break such a spell? Should I try flying above its range?" Vendrick shook his head. "Won't matter. Whether by sea or sky, you'll end up right back where you started." Having observed the waters for days, Vendrick had come to a single conclusion. These labyrinths are powerful, but not unbreakable. Of course, it would be a different story if the witch who cast it were still here. For a labyrinth of this scale, its power source had to be inside it. Vendrick was certain Beatrice wasn't present. Based on the reports of what had transpired on the Ultras continent during their journey, that could only mean one thing. The key to breaking the spell was somewhere nearby. The source of the spell is down there. Vendrick pointed his sword at the ocean depths. Doubt flickered among those who didn't know him well. But Mist and Bladier's trust in him was proof enough. Vendrick knew. Somewhere below the waves, Beatrice had left them a trap. It would be dangerous to dive into those depths. Who knew what horrors lay in wait? But the Empire had no choice. So, at that moment, 3 figures dove into the sea without hesitation. Vendrick, Mist Umbra, Joseph Bladier. The 3 of them plunged into the depths of the demonic sea, descending into the labyrinth Beatrice had prepared for them, unaware of what awaited in the darkness below. Back on the Imperial side, a full day had already passed since Fry and his companions returned home. The entirety of their time spent on the Ultras continent had only been 17 days. But for them, those were 17 days of pure hell. Upon their return, Fry was the last to step out of the portal, draping his cloak over the princess to conceal her demonic horns, shielding her from the curious eyes of those waiting outside. Yet as soon as they drew near, Sansa vanished into the shadows without a sound, as if swallowed by darkness itself. Fry knew that the princess would face a difficult road ahead within the imperial palace, having completely lost her humanity. But his mind was far too drained to dwell on anything more. The moment Ada embraced him, and Carmen approached soon after, Fry felt his body finally relax, a weariness unlike anything he'd ever known before washing over him. His entire body, and even his soul, were completely exhausted. After fighting harder than anyone else, Fry Starlight had completed an impossible mission. And another, far more difficult task still awaited him. Main mission: survive the pursuit. Completed. Reward: 10,000 achievement points. Final mission: save or kill Danzo. Reward: screenshot skill. Penalty: half of the main characters will die. Time limit: 1 month. Staring at the mission screen, then at Danzo's limp body being carried away, rushed to his only remaining family, his father, who ran to his side without hesitation. Fry found himself unable to do anything but watch. Resting his chin on Ada's shoulder, Fry leaned on his sister completely, surrendering to the exhaustion. Fry! Feeling her brother's weight lighten as his body relaxed, Ada realized that Fry, his eyes already closed, had finally fallen asleep. He had stayed awake every single moment of their time on the Ultras continent. Now, at last, the young man had reached his limit. He allowed himself a brief rest, a well-earned reprieve in the only place he could truly call home, by his sister's side. Despite all the hardships he had faced, and the trials yet to come, Fry had earned this one moment of peace. Carmen took over carrying him as the Starlight family quietly withdrew from the scene, slipping away from the chaos stirred by the recent events. Chapter 422. The Aftermath, 2. Unlike the other times when he'd lost consciousness, Fry only slept for a single day before forcing his recovering body back into motion once again. You could say that only Fry was capable of recovering from such a state in the first place. After repeatedly detonating his ignition and maintaining his blood form in constant battle, his body was a chaotic mess inside. Yet he moved as though nothing was wrong. After his brief rest, he spent the following day with Ada, recounting what had happened on the Ultras continent, carefully avoiding the parts about how many times he was stabbed, crushed, or nearly killed. The elite class was the talk of the Empire. Everyone was shocked that they had survived such a deadly trap, and most of the credit naturally went to Phoenix. As expected, the Lord of Sunlight had done more than enough to earn their praise. But even he wouldn't have survived alone in the Ultras continent without the help of his fellow elite classmates. The younger generation had proven themselves, showing the Empire, and especially their enemies, that they were no ordinary talents. Stories of the boy who faced 1,000 soldiers alone, the demonic girl who tore through armies, and the young man who wielded every element, spread quickly. These feats earned them an early graduation from the temple. The situation had changed completely now, and war was inevitable. Fry was well aware of this. But for now, he didn't care much about the war. His focus was solely on one person. He had been asking about him non-stop. Danzo, taken away by his father, Adam Smasher, who had turned his Silver Dragon Guild into a makeshift hospital, desperately searching for a way to save his only son. Watching the giant, hulking Adam running frantically through the halls in desperation to save his boy was a pitiful sight. But it was the harsh reality they were forced to face, especially for Fry, who couldn't stop trying to find a way to help his friend. With the 10,000 achievement points he'd earned, Fry turned to the system's advice, hoping it might hold the answer. Whether it was random or direct, the answer was the same as before. 3 question marks, adding yet another burden to his already troubled heart. The complete devil seed. Curing something like that was simply impossible for Fry, who, despite his vast knowledge of the world and its many mysteries, still couldn't figure out a way to save his friend. Drowning in despair, Fry found himself returning to the temple the next day, having hit a dead end. The temple, now nearly deserted after losing its director and suffering through events that had completely ruined its reputation, was a hollow shadow of what it once was. Ignoring the curious gazes directed his way, Fry searched for the only person left whom he could turn to for help. Thankfully, she was still there. The saintess candidate of the church, Uriel Platini. She had remained behind in the temple, spared from participating in the last war because the bishop refused to let her endanger herself. She was already chosen as the next saintess after Eurassia, and thus they couldn't afford to risk her safety. But by staying behind, Uriel remained unaware of most of the terrifying events that had unfolded over the past few days. And then, Fry appeared before her out of nowhere, prompting her to instinctively greet him with a long embrace. Uriel. Fry spoke with a grim expression, and Uriel slowly loosened her grip on him. Welcome back, Fry. Her smile was like something sacred in itself. But that smile gradually faded as she registered the state Fry was in. What kind of battle did you fight to end up like this? I'm fine, Fry answered briefly. But Uriel immediately rejected that claim. No, you're not. Your internal organs look like they've been trampled several times over. Summoning her holy power, Uriel reached out to heal him, but Fry stopped her by grabbing her hand. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm not the one who needs your power right now. Even though they were standing in the middle of the temple courtyard under the gaze of countless onlookers, Fry didn't hesitate to ask Uriel for help. I know I already owe you, but please, Uriel, I need your help again. Fry was desperate, even more desperate than when he had come to her for Sansa's sake. You could say he was a man who had hit a wall so hard that he had no idea what his next step should be. Seeing him like this, Uriel didn't play around. She became serious too. How exactly can I help? She asked directly, and Fry let out a tired sigh. We'll need to leave the temple first. Hearing that, Uriel gave a small, weary smile. Don't tell me you're going to make me put my holy power into another sword, are you? Fry smiled as well, unable to help himself as he recalled the time when she helped him save Sansa. He truly wished their situation now was as simple as it had been back then. I want you to try and heal one of my comrades. I think there's something demonic inside him. Maybe your holy power can help. Uriel was the destined successor of the Saintess, a girl whose power was said to far surpass even Eurassia's. Blessed with the purest form of holy energy, Fry believed she might just be able to help Danzo. Without hesitation, Uriel agreed to follow him to the Silver Dragon Guild's headquarters. The sight of the two walking side by side attracted countless stares, especially since both were well known among the public. But neither of them cared. You know, Fry, you already owe me one favor. How are you planning to repay me this time? This makes two, you know? Uriel tried to lighten the heavy mood, speaking to him as she used to in the past. But Fry answered immediately, his voice steady with resolve. I'll do anything you ask. Hearing the tone of his voice, Uriel realized just how serious he was. Anything? She repeated softly, her mind wandering as she wondered what anything could possibly mean. But Fry interrupted her train of thought when he suddenly stopped walking. We're here. The Silver Dragon Guild wasn't far, and before they knew it, they had arrived. Without further delay, the two of them stepped inside. Fry had already explained Danzo's situation to Uriel, so she knew exactly why she was there. On the other hand, Adam Smasher wasn't letting anyone near the room where his unconscious son lay. But Fry was an exception, as Danzo's friend and the one who had endured that same hell alongside him. Adam couldn't refuse him, especially when he had brought Uriel Platini, the Saintess candidate, with him. Despite his enormous frame and terrifying presence, Adam Smasher couldn't hide the signs of collapse written all over his face. For all his physical might and brutal strength, Danzo was his only family. His wife had passed long ago, leaving him with no one but his son. Adam had tried every method imaginable to heal his child, but Danzo hadn't opened his eyes once. When Fry and Uriel followed him, Adam led them to a secret chamber, the most secure place in the entire guild. The moment he opened the iron door for them, the sharp scent of medicine hit their noses, filling the air as they stepped inside and surveyed the room. It was a vast, sterile chamber, where Danzo lay unconscious on a bed, his body connected to dozens of wires and tubes. His gray hair was a mess, and his face bore an unprecedented weakness, dark circles painting his features. The once muscular body he had honed through years of training was now covered in scratches and wounds. Gvardiel had crushed every bone in his body, leaving him completely paralyzed and unable to summon even the faintest trace of aura. The moment Uriel placed her hand over his chest, her expression darkened. A deep frown settled on her face before she looked up, her eyes filled with sorrow at the boy's condition. With his core and aura channels utterly shattered, Danzo was left crippled. Forget fighting. He wouldn't even be able to walk again. Perhaps she might have been able to heal him if he could still draw on his aura. But in this state, there wasn't much she could do. Channeling a massive amount of holy energy into him, Uriel Platini gave it her all, restoring some color to Danzo's pale face and healing the internal injuries Adam's medical team couldn't reach. But even after she had poured every ounce of her power into him, scanning his body again and again, she found nothing of what Fry had warned her about. Turning toward him, Uriel shook her head regretfully, but she said nothing in front of Adam Smasher, who showed genuine gratitude, thanking her and Fry repeatedly, his relief palpable. Fry, however, only frowned deeper. As soon as they left the room, leaving Danzo behind, Uriel immediately apologized. "I'm sorry, Fry. I couldn't find any trace of the demonic power you spoke of. I checked him several times, but there's nothing." She wanted to ask if he was sure, but looking at Fry Starlight's expression, she realized he wasn't speaking from doubt or fear. He knew. Yet even so, there was nothing she could do. Her holy power was useless against whatever was afflicting Danzo. And that was what pushed Fry closer to the edge, unable to find any way to save his friend. 28 days remained before the deadline. It was a race against time. A race that threatened to break something deep inside him. Chapter 423. A Dark Fate 1. Fry Starlight's POV. Barely 2 days had passed since we escaped that cursed land of the Ultras. Yet I already found myself at a dead end when it came to saving Danzo. Sitting on one of the temple's benches, staring at the small indoor pond before me, my thoughts wandered far away. Apparently, my brooding expression bothered Uriel, who sat beside me. She eventually broke the silence. "Fry, forgive my question, but how can you be so sure that your friend has a demonic power inside him?" Hearing that, I stared at her for several long seconds before sighing heavily and turning my gaze away once more. There was no way I could explain the system to her. Not even to Uriel, who had helped me time and time again without asking for anything in return. "Let's just say I have my ways." I gave her a vague answer. Uriel didn't seem too satisfied with it, but she chose not to call me out on it. She was always considerate like that. "Should we try again later? Maybe my holy power will work next time." I shook my head in response. "There's no need. You've already done enough, Uriel. If someone as pure as her couldn't detect the seed, then no one else in the church could either." That alone ruled out the entire holy faction. "So what do you plan to do now?" "I don't know." I was completely in the dark this time, unable to find a way forward no matter how hard I tried. Uriel wanted to help. I appreciated that. She was one of the main heroines of my old novel. I knew well that everything she did came from her kindness. If she saw someone in need, she would never hesitate to help. Even her earlier words about me owing her something, they were just her way of making me feel less guilty for receiving her help. She was always considerate like that. Without realizing it, a faint smile crept onto my face. The saintess, Uriel, the cold princess of the Moonlight family, Ceres, the mysterious witch, Selena, the Empyrean Maria, and finally the miracle, Audrey. Each of the 5 main heroines had something unique that set them apart from the others. Their abilities made them destined to become great powers in the future. Especially the last one, Audrey. Thinking of her, I wondered if she had been here, would she have found a way to save Danzo with her special powers? But she wouldn't be appearing anytime soon. I had no way of reaching her. After all, she wasn't even on this planet. Knowing that only deepened my despair. Noticing the darkness surrounding me like a suffocating aura, Uriel tried to shift the subject. So, what will you do now? She was referring to the ongoing war between us and the Ultras, subtly reminding me of the looming future. I heard the current emperor is working tirelessly to rescue the missing soldiers from the bay. Once he succeeds, the war is expected to erupt again, fiercer than ever. Sir Alone Valyrian, a veteran warrior, terrifyingly strong, with vast experience and abilities that put him on par with Dragoth. Uriel was asking me indirectly if I planned to participate in the war. My answer was simple. I don't know. I had no problem returning to that continent and fighting until my body gave out. Maybe I'd find some kind of release if I did. Maybe I'd find that bastard who did this to Danzo. But right now I felt no desire to do so. All I wanted was to save my friend lying in the Silver Dragon Guild's infirmary. Without realizing it, I trembled every time the thought crossed my mind. What if the 30 days run out, and I still can't save him? Then, I'd be forced to kill him, with my own hands. Staring at those hands, I couldn't accept that outcome no matter how hard I tried. The system was pushing me toward that moment. The very thing I was desperately trying to avoid. And so, I spent most of my time lost in that dark mental space, sitting quietly beside Uriel, unable to utter a single word. But everything changed a few minutes later, when I received an unexpected message from Ghost. The moment I read it, I shot up from my seat. What happened? Uriel asked, startled. Danzo. He woke up. It was an ironic twist. We'd been at his side less than an hour ago. Looking at him in that state, unconscious and broken, I thought he'd remain like that for a long time. But he shattered that expectation immediately, waking up on the second day. I was surprised, but Uriel seemed as though she had expected it all along. I healed most of his internal injuries with my holy power. Once his condition stabilized, it wasn't surprising that he woke up sooner than expected. Still, she hadn't been able to cure his paralysis or restore his ability to use aura. Even so, I was grateful to her. And so, I found myself rushing back to the Silver Dragon Guild without delay. When we arrived, I found several familiar faces waiting. Fry, you're finally here. It was Snow. Standing with him were Ghost and Dawn. This was the first time I had seen them since we parted ways at the teleportation gate. Why haven't you gone in yet? I asked, a bit rushed, seeing them all gathered at the entrance. Well, it seems the guild master is causing a bit of a scene right now, Snow said with a faint smile. It looked like Atom Smasher hadn't been able to control himself after his only son regained consciousness. The others seemed relieved too, thinking Danzo had already overcome the worst. I was the last to arrive, along with Uriel, who had come of her own will, wanting to check on Danzo one last time. But we didn't have to wait long. As soon as Atom Smasher heard we were there, he personally came out to greet us. When that massive man appeared, grabbing my hand with his enormous grip, tears welled in the corners of his sharp eyes as he thanked me. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. His gratitude was directed at both me and Uriel, standing beside me. To him, we were the ones who saved his son. But in the face of his gratitude, I could only offer a hollow nod. Adam didn't dwell on it and quickly allowed us inside to see Danzo. And then the long-awaited moment finally arrived. The moment we stepped into his room, that sharp scent of medicine filled my nose once again. But whether it was me or the others, we all froze at the doorway, staring at the figure lying on the bed, leaving an awkward silence between us. Chapter 424. A Dark Fate, 2. What's with those faces? You look like you've seen a ghost. It was Danzo himself who spoke first, with a faint smile and dark shadows under his sunken eyes. Fully conscious now, he looked at us from his bed, unable to move his body. Everyone rushed to his side immediately. "It's good to see you awake, Danzo," Snow spoke first, with the others quickly following his lead. Even Ghost, who was usually quiet, offered a few words of encouragement. But among them all, I found myself sitting at the back, silently staring at him in a daze. All the way to the end, Danzo kept speaking with a smile, his voice calm, so different from the sharp tone he used to have. Barely able to lift the upper half of his body, paralyzed as he was, he looked weak. Too weak. He wasn't the same lively Danzo I knew. The explosive aura that used to surround him was gone, replaced by the stillness of a sick man who could collapse at any moment. I was sure the others felt the same as me, but they did their best to speak to him as if nothing had changed. After all, Danzo himself was suffering the most from his condition. That smile he showed us hid so much. Perhaps regret, sadness, anger. In just one night, he had gone from a proud warrior to a cripple who couldn't even stand. Thanks to the affection system, I could clearly sense the emotions swirling inside him. And that only made me respect him more. To face all of us with a smile, despite the pain gnawing at his heart. What kind of iron will did it take to endure that? The affection system allowed me to share in his pain. And those feelings were suffocating. They weighed heavily on my chest. So, I couldn't bring myself to say a single word. I just sat there, staring at him from afar. After some time, Uriel gently urged everyone not to stay too long, mindful of Danzo's condition. She placed her hands on him one last time, flooding him with holy power, healing his internal injuries completely. Her power was indeed effective. After she used it, Danzo's pale face regained some color, and his body looked healthier than before. Then, when the visit was over, everyone got up to leave. But I found myself unable to move. I asked them to go ahead. "I'll catch up later, guys." I said it briefly, and they understood immediately that I wanted some time alone with him. They were considerate, leaving without hesitation. And once the room was empty, I stood again and walked over to Danzo, sitting in the chair beside his bed. "It's been a while." "Yeah, I guess it's been about 15 days? Maybe more." Danzo kept speaking with his faint smile, unlike the others who had spent most of their time together. I had been away from them for a long while during our time in the Ultras continent, making this reunion feel like it happened after a lifetime. "Don't look at me like that, Fry. I'm still here." Now that we were alone, Danzo finally spoke the words he'd been holding in his heart. Maybe everyone tried to act normal around him, but sometimes, the look in your eyes could say more than words. That look of pity and sorrow. Cut deeper than anything else. "I know, my friend. Even in your state, you're still stronger than me." I spoke with a sincere smile, acknowledging the strength he held despite the suffocating darkness clawing at his mind. From that alone, I was reassured. Danzo wasn't the type to succumb to something like suicide. "This is my fate. I have no choice but to accept it. But it hurts, Fry." "Stop." I cut him off before he could continue down that path. "Sorry, but I don't want to hear that." I didn't want to hear his pain, his regrets, his sorrow. Maybe that made me a terrible friend. But I wanted to preserve his strong image, and I didn't want to dive too deep into the weakness he was showing now. I figured that would be easier for both of us. If he needed to vent, his father, Atom Smasher, was probably a better listener. "You really are selfish, Fry." Danzo sighed tiredly, and I gave him a half-hearted smile. "Sorry, but I've always been that kind of scum. You shouldn't have gotten close to me in the first place if you didn't like it." Danzo shook his head with a frown, sitting a little straighter as if to argue back. "You were right about one thing, though. You were scum. I still remember how they used to beat you up in the Moonlight family. But I beat them in the end, didn't I? With my help, of course." Without even realizing it, we slipped into reminiscing about the past, letting it distract us from the harshness of the present reality. It was refreshing. For both of us. Whether it was me, weighed down by countless burdens, or Danzo, who quietly mourned his own fate in his heart. From the start, I didn't need to hear him complain. I already felt his pain through the affection system. I didn't want to sound arrogant and say I understood his suffering, but at least I had tasted a fragment of the darkness eating away at him. Even though Uriel had warned me not to bother the patient, I ended up sitting there with Danzo for a long time. Since I came to this world, he was probably the only one who ever made me talk this much. Then, after what felt like an hour, we both fell silent, realizing it was time to wrap up this aimless but comforting conversation. A brief escape from reality. In that long stretch of silence, I made up my mind, staring at him seriously. Danzo, have you felt anything strange in your body since you woke up? It was a strange question. Danzo didn't answer right away. He just stared at me quietly for a few seconds before finally breaking the silence. Raising his hands, unable to move his body properly, he gave me a weak smile. Nothing at all. I can't even feel my legs. Guess I'm just half a man now. Danzo chuckled softly, but I couldn't bring myself to laugh at a joke like that. He kept that smile for a moment, then turned his gaze to the ceiling. Honestly, I think the only thing that's changed in me is this darkness that's grown inside my heart. The moment he said that, I found myself listening more closely without meaning to. What do you mean? In response, Danzo finally shared what was truly on his mind. When I think about that battle against him, all I can do is curse reality. Curse my luck, my fate, for putting me against someone like that. He could have fought anyone else. But Beatrice made him face Gvardiel, the most mysterious one of them all. And that sealed his fate. I know this is the excuse of the weak. I only lost because I wasn't strong enough. But no matter how much I try to reason with it, those thoughts keep creeping in. This darkness, it's eating me alive. That sadness in his eyes was undeniable. And me, I could only remain silent. I didn't know whether this darkness he spoke of came from the demonic seed. But I was sure Danzo himself still didn't realize it was there. Seeing him like this, I wanted to save him no matter the cost. No matter what it took. I wanted to keep him alive. Because someone like him was the anchor that kept a part of my humanity intact. Part one couldn't afford to lose. I had never truly realized how much Danzo meant to me. But now, without even meaning to, I started to understand. Unaware that these feelings could one day become unbearable pain. After we talked a little longer, I finally stood from my chair, giving him a quiet farewell as I left the room, leaving him behind. I left the Silver Dragon Guild that day with my mind in turmoil, unable to figure out what I should do next. I didn't feel the passage of time at all. I only regained my sense of reality when I found myself back home. Returning to the Starlight Estate. After exchanging a few hollow words with those around me, including Ada and Carmen, I often withdrew to my room alone, where the light faded as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon. Sitting on my bed, I waged a war within my fevered mind, searching desperately for some kind of salvation. Then, after a few more minutes, I stared at the dark corner of the room with a faint smile and spoke softly. I know you're here. Come out already. It might have looked like I was talking to the wall, but within seconds, the darkness thickened, and a pair of black horns emerged from the shadows, followed by Sansa herself, stepping out of the darkness wearing a black dress that perfectly matched her dark eyes and long horns. Well done noticing me, Sansa said with a smile, but I shook my head. I wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't let me. And that was the truth. Her ability to conceal herself within the shadows was absurdly powerful. Spotting her without permission was nearly impossible. The demonic princess had changed into something entirely different in such a short time. But my feelings toward her hadn't changed at all, which was probably why she hovered around me so often. And like that, the two of us sat side by side on the giant bed in that vast, familiar room where I always found myself returning. Chapter 425. The Demon Princess, 1. Fry Starlight's POV. On the second night after we returned home, a demon came to visit me. It was well past midnight, making it an odd time for her to appear. But I couldn't bring myself to say that to her. She sat quietly beside me, her gaze lost on the ceiling. And no matter how much I tried, I couldn't take my eyes off those demonic horns of hers. Without realizing it, my eyes drifted to them every time I looked at her. You stare too much. Sansa rolled her eyes playfully, smiling as if she hadn't been staring at the ceiling at all. Sorry. No need to apologize. I catch myself staring at them too whenever I look in the mirror. She gently touched her right horn, sparking my curiosity. Can't you hide them? Like you did with your wings? She shook her head. That's impossible. The wings are made of aura, but these horns, they're a living part of my body now, just like any other limb. Cutting them off wasn't an option either. In fact, I could feel a massive amount of her aura concentrated there. I was still trying to get used to her new demonic form, and she was doing the same. How did things go with the new emperor? Without any warning, I asked the question that had been on my mind. Ah, my grandfather? I guess he wants to kill me right about now. She laughed bitterly, speaking with no care at all. You should have seen his face when he found out his only granddaughter turned into a demon. Hilarious, really? Even though she brushed it off, I couldn't help but stare at her seriously, which quickly caught her attention. What's with that look? Worried about me? Kind of. We're talking about Sir Alone Valyrian here. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say he was the strongest SS Plus on the planet, right alongside Dragoth. To have someone like that targeting her life, it was no laughing matter. Don't worry, it's not like he's gonna kill me right away. The Imperial Palace is still in chaos, and they haven't decided what to do with me yet. Besides, they'll have to catch me first. With a light snap of her fingers, Sansa stirred a gust of wind that shook the room. Don't forget, I'm really strong now. I bet I could secure a high rank among the demons. Upper Demon Sansa. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? She laughed, showing her usual carefree attitude. She didn't care about anything around her. She just did whatever she wanted without a second thought. I found myself seeing a new side of her. Sansa the demon was completely different from the gloomy princess she used to be. You're thinking I've changed, aren't you? As if reading my mind, she said it first. Couldn't deny it. I can't deny it. I sighed softly. I've never lived life from a demon's perspective, so I don't know what it's like. I guess it's not exactly pleasant. I tried to be considerate, but she shook her head. Not at all. Honestly, being a demon feels pretty great. What? I blurted out. Becoming a demon lets me live off the aura around me. My body's practically made of it now. I don't need food or sleep or even a bathroom. I don't sweat anymore, and I'm strong enough to bend steel with my hands. Listing off the perks of becoming a demon, I found myself staring at her, unable to form a proper response. She lowered her gaze to the floor. But that doesn't change the fact that I've become a monster. With my constant absorption of aura, I'll bring death wherever I go. That was the truth. That's why demons were considered evil beings. Their endless consumption of life energy destroyed the world they once called home, forcing them to invade others in search of sustenance. Demons could live forever, as long as they fed on the energy of life itself. That's why they were at war with all living things. And now Sansa was one of them. I already knew all of that, but even so, I don't think a single demon is enough to doom the world. I spoke seriously. I bet you could absorb this planet's aura for thousands of years, and it wouldn't make a difference. Maybe it sounded like I was just trying to comfort her, but it was the truth. The reason demons brought death wherever they went wasn't because of one or two individuals. It was because there were too many of them. If it's just me, then it's fine. Is that what you're trying to say? She read my thoughts again and laughed softly. You might be right, Fry, but that leads us to something else. Leaning her face close to mine, I instinctively leaned back slightly. Now that I live on this power, I can feel the enormous aura hidden within you. Sansa spoke as if she were eyeing a fine meal rather than a human being, causing me to frown instinctively. She had effortlessly discovered my SSS rank Aura C. So, it was a secret? She asked playfully, while I sighed, brushing it aside.
No.
I've been using it openly lately, so it was only a matter of time before people found out. Sansa nodded. I won't ask how you got it, but right now, you're looking very tempting to me. Tempting enough that I might accidentally kill you. Please don't. I'm joking. No need to make that face. With that, she flopped onto the bed, resting her head on my right knee, leaving me speechless. She really did whatever she pleased. You know, Fry, after becoming one of them, I discovered that demons prefer negative emotions from other beings. Things like sadness, anger, hatred, and resentment. We feel those emotions so vividly, and they feel wonderful. So much more than positive feelings like happiness. Lying there on my lap, she spoke while gazing up at me from below. What she said wasn't new to me, but she wasn't finished yet. Her eyes locked onto mine with quiet intensity, as if she could see beyond my human facade. You're a walking ball of misery, Fry. In that moment, I finally understood what she was trying to say. So now you can see more than just facial expressions, I said with a hollow chuckle. But Sansa didn't smile back. Your negative emotions make being around you strangely pleasant. They bring me joy at times, and pain at others. What weighs on your heart so much, I wonder? She asked a simple question, but one with too many answers I couldn't bear to voice. I was trapped on all fronts. A demon king watching my every move. A madman engineer hellbent on turning my life into hell. And a friend I might have to save. Or kill. I stayed silent for a long time, until Sansa slowly lifted her head from my lap, sadness crossing her face. It's Danzo, isn't it? She spoke his name out of nowhere, surprising me even more with what she said next. What a cruel fate he's suffered. I never thought I'd meet another soul besides myself who carries the same cursed seed. The moment she said seed, my mind froze. I grabbed her almost desperately. You know about it? Seeing my reaction, Sansa nodded calmly. Yes, I could feel it in him from the start. He might be a more perfect vessel than I am, but we both come from the same origin. The second she said that, a new possibility opened in my mind. A way through the wall I'd hit when trying to save him. But for the third time, Sansa read my thoughts before I could voice them, and crushed my hope where it stood. I know what you're thinking, Fry, but I'm sorry. I can't save him. Her words hit like a child having their candy taken away. I instinctively pulled away, deflated. Chapter 426. The Demon Princess. 2. The seed has fully merged with his body. Now, it's only a matter of time before the will inside it awakens. All I can do is suppress it for as long as possible. Apparently, Sansa had already snuck into where Danzo was resting. Using her powers, all she could manage was to keep his human side alive for as long as she could. But when the time came, Danzo was destined to become that monster. In that instant, I finally understood where the 1-month time limit had come from. It was her. Sansa looked at me with quiet sadness. Danzo had been a rare kind of friend. Even for her, someone who hadn't spoken with him much until recently. I think you already know. But when the time is up, we'll have no choice but to. I know. I cut her off before she could finish. Maybe she went to see him intending to end it, but she just couldn't bring herself to kill him. Instead, she gave him as much time as possible to live on as the Danzo we all knew. In the blink of an eye, a small spark of hope had appeared, then died just as quickly. I didn't know if she sensed my disappointment or something else. But then Sansa stood, pulling me into a tight embrace, burying my face against her chest. Her grip was too strong for me to break, even if I tried. So I let myself go with the flow. Her body was incredibly strong, yet impossibly soft. A strange contradiction. I had deliberately avoided her gaze, yet she kept staring at me even now. Then silence fell. Sansa no longer had a human heart, so the only sound in the room was my own heartbeat. A few seconds later, she broke the silence again. When I turned into a demon, I think a part of me rejected it. That's why I tried to kill myself on the battlefield. to end the disgusting thing I'd become. She was recalling the end of our battle against the Ultras. I remembered how she had fought Beatrice and Gavid Lindman alone, acting like she was having the time of her life. But who would have thought those kinds of thoughts were swirling inside her all along? I knew a demon couldn't live among humans. Even Oliver gave me that look of pity the moment he saw me. Maybe his mask had hidden his expression, but Sansa could read those feelings through his eyes alone. The same eyes that now looked at her like she was a monster. And yet, you're the only one who didn't look at me that way. I want to know why. Why didn't I treat you like a monster? I chuckled softly, recalling everything. It wasn't like I did it on purpose. I could never treat you like that, Sansa. After all, the real monster here is me. If she was a demon, then this body of mine was far from human too, with bizarre powers, and the looming presence of some otherworldly being inside me. If anything, I fit the title of monster better than she did. That alone was why I never changed the way I treated her. Because I simply didn't have the right to. I didn't know how much of that Sansa understood from my thoughts. But she didn't ask. Maybe she was waiting for the day I'd tell her myself. So we left it at that embrace. For a brief moment, it felt like something else was about to happen, especially when our eyes met again. But neither of us moved. Not with everything at stake. I guess she was being considerate, otherwise she would have done whatever she pleased. Then, after a moment of awkward silence, she finally let me go. To break the silence, I spoke up, realizing she'd been here far too long already. I'll talk to my sister about it later. You can stay here for now. Given that she was probably being hunted by Sir alone right now, it seemed right to hide her in the Starlight Estate for the time being. Are you sure about that? You might end up on the receiving end of my grandfather's wrath if he finds me here. She laughed again, regaining that playful tone of hers, but I wasn't particularly concerned about Sir alone. When the Demon King himself was already breathing down my neck, what difference would adding one more threat make? I'll worry about that when it happens. I see. Then I guess I should thank you. For what? All I'm doing is giving you a room in this house. The moment I said that, Sansa narrowed her eyes mischievously. A separate room. Huh? Yes, a separate room, I said firmly. Realizing what she was trying to do, I quickly pulled away. After all, if I stayed with her in the same room any longer, even I wouldn't be able to control myself, and things would escalate far beyond a mere embrace. We both wanted it. That much was clear. But this wasn't the right time. Not with everything I was dealing with right now. I couldn't afford to think about Sansa properly. Not yet, at least. Until then, it was better to draw the line. All right then. With a wide grin, she stood up, the darkness thickening around her until it swallowed her whole. But remember, Fry, walls don't mean much to me. And just like that, she vanished completely into the shadows. Placing a hand over my face, I sighed quietly. She really picked up an annoying ability. Lying back on my bed, far too large for one person, I realized just how late it had gotten after spending so many hours with the Demon Princess. So I closed my eyes, trying to fall asleep, knowing full well how much awaited me in the days to come. That night, for the first time in a while, I managed to fall into a deep sleep, something that had eluded me recently. Her presence, oddly enough, had been comforting. And so, another long day came to an end. Final deadline, 27 days left. The days passed quickly after that. I kept visiting Danzo whenever I had the chance. But no matter how many times I looked at him, he was no longer the same person. The energetic, explosive man I knew had turned into a quiet, frail figure, confined to his bed, drained of his strength. As painful as it was for Danzo himself, it was equally painful for me to witness. Still, I tried my best to hide those feelings from him, while preparing myself for the final plan my mind could come up with. I waited until my body fully recovered, and in the blink of an eye, another 5 days flew by. But now that I was back at my peak, it was time to take the next step. Fully equipped and armed with a dimensional ring packed with everything I could carry, I stood alone atop the eastern peaks of the Oakloss Mountains, overlooking the nightmare lands ahead. After exhausting every option I had on this planet, I came to a bitter realization. The answer I sought didn't exist among humans. To save Danzo, I needed a power far beyond anything found here. A power that existed on another world entirely. Staring at the system interface, I confirmed what I was about to do. You won't tell me how to save Danzo, but you will show me the way to leave this planet. Spending all my achievement points, I steeled myself for a journey into the unknown, a quest that might lead me to Danzo's salvation. Time moved much slower here on Earth than on other planets. That was something I'd already learned during our trip to Launder, so I wasn't too worried about the countdown. I had found a way to bend the system's rules to my favor. With that, I ventured alone into the nightmare forests, heading toward the Shadow Sect. The starting point of my journey. Whatever answer I was searching for, I was certain I would find it there. And with all my heart, I prayed that the future waiting for me would be just a little less dark than the one fate had written in stone. Chapter 427. More Secrets. 1. Fry Starlight's POV. Hoof. Letting out a deep breath, I took a sip of water while sitting on a fallen tree trunk. Once I quenched my dry throat, I wiped away the blood that stained me from the battles, then cast a quick glance downward. There, beneath me, lay a horrifying number of nightmare beast corpses. The aftermath of my journey. It had been 5 days since I set out on this journey to the Shadow Sect. This trip had taken much longer than usual since I was forced to take the hard way, crossing the entire nightmare lands from one end to the other. I guess my father must have done the same thing once. But the difference between us was staggering. He had to face one of the nightmare lords back then, and thanks to that, the road was now paved for me. After a long journey, I was finally about to reach the Shadow Sect, the starting point of my next path. If I wanted to save Danzo, I had to leave Earth and search for a way to save him elsewhere. Within just a few days, I had realized that the answer I sought wouldn't be found among humans. Unwilling to accept a fate where I'd have to kill one of my closest friends, I was now heading into an adventure where I had no idea what awaited me. All I knew was that I had to move faster. Leaping from tree to tree, my body was wrapped in a glowing violet aura as I dashed at full speed. Cutting through the eastern nightmare lands, I finally reached my destination. If I wanted to leave Earth, the sect was my only option. I was still far too weak to leave on my own, so once again, I had no choice but to rely on the system. Once I left Earth, I figured Ada would panic. The device she had linked to my heart wouldn't work anymore. Sorry, Ada, but this is the only way. Unlike every other journey I'd taken before, this one was completely reckless. It wasn't forced on me by the system, and I had no idea what awaited me on the other side. The odds of dying were terrifyingly high. Even though I was strong by Earth standards, I was still nothing but an insect compared to those who lived beyond. A mere speck in a vast universe filled with countless horrors. To save Danzo, I would probably need the help of one of those monsters who defied logic itself. Which meant sooner or later I would have to face them. In the end, all I could do was pray I'd somehow succeed. And return in time. After several more hours of running nonstop, lost in my thoughts, I finally reached the place I had been searching for. The Black Mountain. Long ago, humans had built the sect within this mountain, but now it had become home to beings far from human. Step by step, I climbed the marble staircase, heading upward. I expected the place to be empty as usual. I'd gotten used to that by now. But to my surprise, I stopped climbing as I neared the summit, finally spotting them. You too. At the top of the stairs, they stood like silent sentinels. 2 statues. One with a smiling face, the other with a sorrowful one on the verge of tears. Smiley and sad were there, radiating a crushing dark aura. SS rank. I narrowed my eyes at both of them. Back then, I couldn't grasp the full extent of their strength. But now, having reached a comparable level, I could finally estimate their true power. You two were holding back against me, weren't you? I felt slightly embarrassed. I had trained with them for a whole year, and only now did I realize how much they had been going easy on me. Cautious and fully prepared, I approached them. Were they standing guard over the sect? Or were they here for me? I wasn't sure. Their stone-like faces showed no emotion, and the purple light glowing in their hollow eyes gave nothing away. "Will you let an old friend pass?" I spoke cautiously, ready to fight if I had to. Unlike before, I now had enough power to take them on, even if it would be a brutal battle. But my fears were unnecessary. After a few tense seconds, the two of them exchanged glances, then silently stepped aside, clearing the way for me to pass. Suspicious, I paused, wondering if they really intended to let me through so easily. Standing between them, I glanced at each of them in turn. "You're not going to attack me the moment I turn my back, are you?" My question was met with gloomy silence, but their eyes stared at me with what could only be described as silent irritation. As if they were saying, "Get lost already. How rude." Ignoring them, I turned my attention back to the sect. And then I froze in place, my eyes wide in shock. What the hell happened here? Lifting my gaze toward the sky, I saw dark skyscrapers piercing the clouds, built from the same mysterious black metal whose origin I still didn't know. Hundreds of new structures filled the landscape, and the sect was now several times larger than when I last saw it. It's barely been 2 months, and yet the place had transformed into a vast city rather than a mere sect. It looked like a dark fortress fit for an evil lord from the medieval ages, prompting me to turn toward the statues again. "Did you two build all this?" In response, they simply stared at me in silence before turning away, clearly uninterested. Guess I'm not getting any answers from them. Sighing in defeat, I took my first steps deeper inside. As I took in the new architecture, I couldn't help but feel a strange awe for the place, but at the same time, a deep sense of dread filled me. The dark aura the sect now radiated sent chills down my spine, warning me that something ominous was going on. What exactly are they trying to build here? Was it a city? Some kind of grand sect? No matter how much I looked, it didn't feel that way. The way it was built, it looked more like a fortress, a stronghold. Whoever was behind this place was preparing for war, reinforcing the entire sect with relentless determination. Trying to ignore all that, I followed the system's direct advice, focusing on the plan I came here for. Despite the ominous feeling growing inside me, I tried to push it aside and finish what I came to do quickly. The system's hint had led me here, but strangely, the usual obstacle it would place in my path never showed up, making me uneasy. Still, I had no choice but to press on. Step by step, I made my way past the towering buildings. And after several more minutes of walking, I finally arrived at the temple where it had all begun. This is where I got this strange body, alongside Balerion, and where I left for Launder for the first time. But the temple looked very different now. A giant gate, over 10 meters tall, the place was far grander than before, covered in strange, dark engravings. Standing before the door, I pushed with all my strength, forcing it open, eager to see what was waiting for me on the other side. The door was incredibly heavy, but I managed to open it, casting light onto what lay within. The inside was pitch black and empty, but unlike last time, the altar where I had once lain still stood there, and sitting upon it was a familiar figure, clad in black, with piercing blue eyes staring straight at me. "You've finally arrived." Chapter 428. More Secrets. 2. He spoke in an icy tone, calm and collected. But on my end, with bloodshot eyes, I immediately drew my swords in fury, my body exploding with violet aura, ready to lunge at him in an instant. "You finally showed yourself, you son of a bitch." I was about to shatter the floor beneath me and hurl myself at him with everything my body could muster. But in less than a second, a crushing weight slammed down on my shoulders, freezing me in place. A tremendous aura pressure, the strongest I'd ever felt, paralyzed me completely. Surrounded by that blue aura radiating from the engineer, I realized it was coming from him. Did you learn nothing from last time? He spoke with the same frigid tone, rising from his seat as he approached, radiating that overwhelming aura. You know you can't defeat me. Struggling against him, I tried to move in any way I could. But it was pointless. My dark aura was nothing but a tiny speck against the ocean of absolute power he unleashed. Face to face with him, I tried my best to calm myself, gradually suppressing my aura. Normally, I wouldn't have been able to keep my cool in front of him, but things had changed after all I'd been through. As much as I wanted to rip that mysterious face of his apart, now wasn't the time. I simply didn't have the strength to take him down. Not yet. Besides, I knew he wouldn't kill me. This bastard wanted me alive more than anyone else. So, bit by bit, I forced myself to calm down under his cold, blue gaze. A wise choice. This will do. With those words, he retracted his aura, allowing me to finally catch my breath, and reminding me once again of the vast gap in our power. In front of that kind of strength, I had even forgotten how to breathe. The engineer ignored me completely, walking past as he left the temple. Where do you think you're going? Leaping from my place, I chased after him immediately. This was probably the longest time I'd ever spent in the same space with the blue-eyed bastard. There was no way I'd just let him disappear again. But, contrary to my expectations, he didn't leave. With a single motion of his lone hand, his power swept across the entire sect, and in an instant, more dark structures materialized from thin air. At that moment, I finally got my answer, the one I'd been wondering about since I arrived. So he was the one who built this place. Staring at his back, I felt a tangled mess of emotions surge within me. Most of them a burning hatred that made me want to kill him on the spot. But tangled up with that hatred was the weight of countless unanswered questions. Questions I was sure only he could answer. Ask if you've got questions. This is your chance. As if reading my mind, the blue-eyed man spoke calmly, still manipulating the terrain like it was nothing. I let out a dry laugh without meaning to. Now that's unexpected. Since when are you feeling generous, engineer? I said coldly, but as usual he said nothing. There was no reason for him to lie to me. If he wanted to escape, I'd never be able to find him anyway. With the door open before me, 100 questions flooded my head. All the things I desperately wanted answers to. But above them all, I asked the one question that brought me here in the first place. How do I save Danzo? I asked firmly, giving it my full focus. The final mission gave me two choices. Save him or kill him. And if anyone knew a third way, it would be this son of a bitch. I waited for his answer. A few seconds passed. There's no clear answer to that question. The veins on my forehead twitched like worms as rage welled up again. What the hell do you mean by that? Aren't you the one who said this question would require using the system's inquiry skill? And that I'd regret it if I used it too soon? I shouted without thinking, frustration spilling out of me. He was supposed to know the answer. He was the one who hinted at it through the system interface that day. But the engineer showed no reaction. He turned toward me calmly. You seem to misunderstand something, Fry Starlight. Coldly, he spoke words more confusing than anything I'd heard from him before. Did you really think I was the one who created the system you've been using all this time? His words made me furrow my brows in disbelief. What are you talking about? Wake up already. There's no way I could give you a power like that. Continuing to spew this nonsense, my mind only filled with more questions instead of answers. I couldn't help but yell in frustration. What the hell are you saying? If you didn't create it, then who did? That power was inside you from the start. All I did was shape it into a system interface so you could use it more easily. That's all the system is. Your own power, nothing else. Each word felt like a hammer pounding my skull. No way. This couldn't be true. There were too many contradictions. If the system was my own power, how did he manipulate it in the first place? What kind of bullshit are you trying to sell me? Weren't you the one who issued missions? Weren't you the one who gave me answers after the Victoriad? I kept screaming, while he calmly continued reshaping the sect. I don't issue your missions. What? And as for the system inquiry, all I did was tell you the answer because I happened to know it at the time. Unlike now, when I genuinely have no clear answer. His words hit me like relentless blows. Suddenly, memories of the system's sarcastic remarks, its cryptic missions, and everything else came flooding back. Covering my face with my hands as my expression darkened, a terrible realization crept over me. That wasn't the engineer. It seems you've finally caught on. As his voice echoed in the temple, I collapsed onto the ground without meaning to, realizing I'd just opened a door to an entirely new nightmare. If it wasn't you, then who? I asked once more, staring up at him. He opened his mouth and answered flatly. I won't tell you. What? Why so surprised? I said I'd listen to your questions. I never said I'd answer all of them. Hearing that smug response again, especially now of all times, I found myself drawing my swords, unable to control my rage any longer. You really are a son of a bitch, damned engineer. The filthy engineer. That title suits you perfectly. Exploding the ground beneath my feet, I shot toward him at blinding speed, ready to blow him to pieces with every ounce of power I had. Take your cursed nonsense and go to hell. Swinging my sword, I slashed at him with terrifying speed. My blade was mere inches from cutting him down. But then, in that moment, time froze in the strangest, most unnatural way. Only the engineer moved, unaffected. Calmly, he placed his hand, glowing with an overwhelming blue light, right on my chest. Sleep for a while. Maybe it'll help clear your head. Even though time itself was frozen, I could hear his voice with perfect clarity. Then, without warning, his fist released a destructive wave of aura that tore through my body, hurling me backward until I smashed through the temple wall, shattering it completely and breaking through to the other side. I collapsed on the ground, defeated in a single blow. With one strike, the engineer had knocked me out cold, leaving me buried in the abyss of darkness. The gap between our powers was beyond measure. I don't know how long I remained unconscious, but when I finally awoke, night had already fallen outside. With heavy, dragging steps, I stumbled out of the temple, wounded far more in spirit than in body. And there he was, the damned engineer, still standing there, calmly continuing to build the sect. Facing him once again, I realized something clearly. My time with those piercing blue eyes was far from over. You truly are a damned son of a bitch, cursed engineer. Chapter 429. More Secrets. 3. Fry Starlight's POV. After night had fallen, I found myself standing there like a fool, facing the engineer. That damned man was still expanding the sect, building it larger and larger with every passing moment. I had thought he would disappear the moment I woke up, but once again he shattered my expectations. Since the day I reincarnated as Fry Starlight, this was the longest time I had ever spent with that cursed engineer. Yet despite that, he didn't pay me much attention. He simply continued to build the sect with some strange power I couldn't begin to comprehend. What are you trying to create here? I asked without even thinking. The engineer, fully aware of my presence, answered calmly. It's for the future. The future. Staring at his back, I realized then, those blue eyes of his were playing some kind of game with me again. Usually, it took going through hell itself just to get a single answer from him after endless suffering. But here he was now answering my questions out of nowhere. Of course, there were still things he refused to answer. And even when he did, I couldn't be sure whether what he told me was the truth. After all, he could lie at any moment if it served his own interests. Still, I decided to set my emotions aside for now and extract as much information from him as possible. Do you really know the future? That was a question that had haunted me for some time. I could never escape the engineer's grasp because of that cursed ability of his, to predict everything I knew. That's right, the engineer confirmed. Is that why you showed parts of it to my sister Ada? And to others as well? The engineer nodded again. That's also true. Why are you doing this? To create the future I desire. And what kind of future is that? I won't answer. Another dead end. I sat down on the ground, lost in thought, searching for the right question to ask next. Then, after a brief silence, I simply voiced the question that had been weighing on my mind. What am I to you? Am I just a vessel for the king you serve? Is that your goal? To resurrect your so-called king? Upon hearing that, the engineer turned his head slightly, locking eyes with me for a second, then turned away. I won't answer. Another roadblock. Frustration welled up inside me, but I knew I couldn't force him to reveal anything he didn't want to. The engineer was a cunning being who never did anything unless it served his own selfish goals. His appearance before me now, allowing me to ask these questions, was probably part of his preparation for some future event. He knew I wouldn't be able to resist the chance to clear away some of the mystery surrounding him. And he was using that against me, as always, so I decided to use him in return as much as I could. You said before that saving Danzo has many possible answers. What did you mean by that? I shifted the conversation back to my friend, who was still on the verge of death. He was the reason I had come here in the first place. This time, the engineer gave me an answer. A complete devil seed is like a cursed object that fuses with its host's body. To deal with something like that, you'll need abilities far beyond human comprehension. Something that can be obtained from several sources. I already knew that much. It's for those very abilities that I was planning to leave this planet. Humans simply aren't capable of reaching them. As I stared at his back, something clicked in my mind. You're not going to let me leave, are you? That's right, he answered calmly. My expression darkened. So that's why he was here. In that moment, I remembered the obstacle the system's direct advice always warned me about. Perhaps this time the obstacle was the engineer himself. He turned to face me once more. There's no need for you to leave. The knowledge you seek is already within your grasp. I knew exactly what he meant by that. I slowly extended my hand, and a black metallic mask appeared in my palm. The nameless mask, its hollow eye sockets staring back at me like the eyes of a hawk. What kind of trick are you trying to pull now? I had avoided putting on this mask, partly out of fear of the will that once took control of me, and partly because I was unable to comprehend what lay inside it. I still remembered what happened when I wore it in Launder, the flood of information that tore through my mind at that time. Knowledge as vast as the universe itself. I would have died right then if he hadn't stepped in and forcibly removed the mask from me. But he simply shook his head. You won't suffer any harm if you put it on now. Your body has already adapted to it. Though, how much knowledge you gain from it will depend entirely on you. What the hell do you mean? Explain yourself. Damn it. I asked again, impatience creeping into my voice, still uneasy about the nameless mask. This time, the engineer continued, satisfying my curiosity for once. Shadow adaptation. He spoke the name of my strongest ability, shedding light on something I hadn't even thought to ask about until now. I wanted to question him about the origin of that overwhelming power, but he began speaking on his own, leaving no room for interruption. In this vast universe, there are countless mysterious laws that bind it. Laws like causality, inevitability, life and death, chaos, and many more. You won't even perceive their existence until you reach a certain level of power and understanding. But there are special abilities that transcend those laws. These are the powers that break the world's fundamental laws. Continuing his explanation, the engineer delved deeper. Abilities like my foresight. The future I see is absolute, inevitable. That is inevitability. Then there are other abilities like one possessed by your friend, the last survivor. That one reshapes the causes and effects of reality itself, creating sharp turning points that ensure his survival no matter what. That is causality. Abilities of this caliber do not simply appear out of nowhere. They are either inherited, bestowed, or created by the individual. Listening to him, I felt my mind expanding involuntarily. Of course, I already knew about the existence of such laws, though my understanding of them was still vague. This realm of power was far beyond anything I could fully grasp. And as for Dawn's ability, I was aware of it as well. I had written about it once before. It had been given to him by. In that moment, just as I was about to speak the name, a sharp wave of pain shot through my skull, forcing me to clutch my head in agony as my eyes widened in shock. Who gave that power to Dawn? I questioned myself, unable to recall the answer no matter how hard I tried. I knew I had known it. I was certain I knew it just seconds ago. But now, no matter how much I searched my mind, I couldn't find it. And the harder I tried, the worse the pain became. What the hell is happening? I screamed unconsciously as the migraine tore through my mind. I felt as though I was just a breath away from seeing that being's face, whoever they were. But every time I got closer to remembering, a strange fog blanketed the image, hiding their features behind a mysterious smile. Forget it. The engineer spoke, his voice low, an uncharacteristic fear in his tone. That's one of his powers. When you forget him, you'll remember. And when you try to remember, you'll forget. A filthy creature, as always. He spoke of someone terrifying enough to unsettle even him. But it wasn't Agaroth. I knew the abilities of the Demon King all too well. Even though he possessed more law-breaking abilities than anyone else, this wasn't one of them. And that drove me to ask, who is this being? Who gave Dawn the last survivor? At that moment, the engineer's eyes lit up, and he opened his mouth once more. I won't answer. With those words, I realized that the fog surrounding that person's face would remain for a long, long time. Chapter 430. More Secrets. 4. Accepting my ignorance, the engineer resumed his initial explanation, ignoring Dawn's mystery entirely. There was no point in forcing the issue. No matter how much I tried, I wouldn't uncover that identity. This was the law of nothingness. Among these powerful abilities, some follow the law of chaos. These are powers centered on destruction and close combat, like your shadow adaptation or your father's absolute manipulator. My father! Ignoring everything else he had said, my mind zeroed in on those final words. He mentioned my father out of nowhere. He had a power like that too? I asked, and the engineer nodded. Abraham Starlight was special in his own way. He far exceeded my expectations time and time again. Using the system that served him, along with his own strength, he forged a brand new path of power that belonged solely to him. He created the Absolute Manipulator, an ability that destroyed every aura pathway and core within his body, transforming his entire being into a chaotic sea of aura. He embodied the law of chaos completely, pushing his body beyond its limits in both speed and strength, wielding an aura manipulation I had never witnessed before, even in all my long years. The engineer spoke at length, in fact, far too much. So much so that it almost felt unreal. And yet, I found myself drawn in. My father created something like that. Abraham was destined for greatness. No human ever possessed the traits that he did. He was the pinnacle of your wretched species, without a doubt. His ability died with him. What he achieved can never be replicated. But his fate was a dark one. In that moment, something resurfaced in my mind. Weskier, the fourth-ranked demon. I still remembered how the engineer had panicked back then, the moment that demon appeared. But that doesn't make sense. Didn't you say the future you see is absolute and inevitable? What happened that day, then? The engineer simply shook his head. That's what happens when two law-breaking abilities collide. In that moment, a wave of understanding struck my mind out of nowhere. And suddenly, I grasped something incredibly important. The King's Eye. That was Weskir's ability, granted to him by Agaroth. An ability that sees fate itself. No different from what the engineer possessed, perhaps even surpassing it. Both of them fell under the concept of inevitability. So, you finally understand, the engineer said calmly. When two law-breaking abilities clash, irregularities occur, and the future we see becomes uncertain. This is the first way to counter these kinds of powers. Listening to him, my heart pounded relentlessly in my chest. I couldn't believe what he was giving me, the way out of that destiny. He was handing it to me himself, leaving me completely bewildered. But he continued speaking anyway. The first way to fight against a world-breaking ability is with another ability of the same level. That's what happened between me and that fourth-rank demon. And the second way is to become a being who breaks the world's laws yourself. To reach a level of power so great that those laws no longer apply to you. Such beings are rare. Very few have ever reached that height of greatness. Gazing up at the sky, the engineer spoke with quiet melancholy. The most notable example of that is the Demon King himself. Then his gaze returned to me, sharp and serious. That's why I can't allow you to leave this place and head into the unknown. You're far too weak. Out there, beyond this world, is a realm teeming with beings who wield such powers. The engineer turned and began to walk away, but I immediately followed after him. So that's it, huh? You just don't want me to go and die up there because you cannot guarantee the future you see when there are beings with abilities similar to yours. Like Weskier. That's right. I can handle things here. Or in Launder. But the rest of the world? That's another story. He stared at his single hand. The one ravaged by cracks and weakened by time. The engineer's blue eyes. They were so ancient. And countless questions began swirling in my mind about the purpose he had lived for all this time. If what I saw through the Nameless mask was true, then the engineer was one of the people the Nameless once saved, so powerful that he became his right hand. And after the Nameless death, he had lived on, striving to accomplish something. Wandering for thousands of years, never resting, never faltering, in a vessel that slowly deteriorated over time, continuing to pursue whatever mission he lived for. For the first time since our twisted relationship began, I felt something other than hatred and contempt toward the engineer. Curiosity. Curiosity about the iron will that had driven him to continue this long. But I knew he wouldn't speak about himself, so I asked something else instead. By what you just said, I'm supposed to die if I go up there, right? But I find that hard to believe. After all, there was a being who could reach me no matter where I was. Agaroth has already reached me twice. If he wanted me dead, it wouldn't matter if I was above ground or beneath it. I'd be dead for sure. So what's the point of keeping me here? I laid it out plainly. Agaroth was a being who broke the world's laws himself. Those cursed laws meant nothing to him. The King's Eye, which had shaken even the engineer, was only one of dozens of abilities the Demon King possessed. So what was the point of all this? And in that moment, the engineer spoke words that sent an even sharper pain through my head. What are you talking about? He said. What? Agaroth won't kill you. He needs you alive just as much as I do. Perhaps even more. Your survival is necessary to the Demon King. Like you said yourself, if he wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. Haven't you wondered about that? He was right. This was Agaroth we were talking about. A monstrous power that constantly haunted my mind. I was naive to think the engineer had done something to keep him away. The engineer couldn't even approach him, let alone oppose him. But still, why? What does he want from me? What the hell am I to all of you? Why would the Demon King himself care this much about me? The engineer returned to his usual cryptic self, leaving me in darkness once again. I won't answer. He said it flatly, walking away from the subject and returning to where this entire conversation had begun. Your shadow adaptation is one of those law-breaking abilities we spoke of. It lets you adapt to all phenomena and powers of every kind. It has made your mind strong enough to withstand the mask now. So go, and try to save your friend. But remember this. His voice grew colder. The future is dark, Fry Starlight. Know that I didn't give you this power without reason. That is my warning to you. Unlike all the random people he used to visit before, this time he came to me. He had just given me the way to escape my fate. And yet, I still couldn't grasp what he truly wanted from me. Most likely, he would continue manipulating me, just as he always had. The feeling of helplessness in the face of such overwhelming powers remained the same. All of these mighty beings, each harbored some vague, incomprehensible desire for me, and I had no choice but to walk along the current of fate. But at the very least, now I knew how to break it. Determined to find the answers to all these unknowns, I felt the will to fight burning within me once again. Placing the nameless mask over my face, I resolved to stand against this current of destiny once more. And it all began with saving Danzo, whose life now rested in my hands. In that moment, beneath the Shadow Sect, now vast enough to resemble the capital of a mighty nation, I continued forward, ready to face whatever the future still concealed from me. Chapter 431. The Weight of Cosmic Knowledge 1. Fry Starlight's POV. I could barely describe those few fleeting moments before I put the mask on once more. They were some of the rare moments when emotions overlapped and tangled together inside me. Fear of an ancient while slumbering within that metallic thing, and a slow-growing anxiety gnawing at my heart. Then came longing and hope, pushing me to act quickly, knowing now that the answer to saving Danzo lay within it. And in that moment, under the watchful gaze of the engineer, who couldn't stop himself from observing the step I had finally decided to take, I placed the nameless mask on my face once again, gazing at the world through the cold slits of that mask. First, nothing changed, but before long, my entire perspective shifted. What is this? The words slipped from my lips unconsciously, and I stumbled back until my back hit the wall. It was an indescribable feeling, as if all that information came flooding back into my mind one after another, like someone stabbing a giant needle into my back and injecting torrents of knowledge straight into my body. It was exactly as that damned engineer had said. Thanks to the shadow adaptation, my mind could now withstand the mask. I always knew the shadow adaptation allowed me to adapt to my enemies, and it had helped me in countless battles so far, but I had truly believed it was limited to martial arts. Nothing more, nothing less. Who would have thought that the true scope of this ability extended far beyond the battlefield itself, adapting me to any phenomenon I might face in life? What a terrifying ability! I muttered without realizing it. The engineer said the shadow adaptation belonged to the path of the law of chaos, a tremendous power even by the standards of those who dwell in the heights. Didn't that mean it was the only way I could break free from my predetermined fate, shattering this wheel of destiny that kept dragging me along in its current? After all, the future foreseen by beings like the engineer and Agaroth could only be broken by something like this, a power akin to their own. Fully grasping that truth, the value of the shadow adaptation multiplied within my heart, and I finally understood its true worth. I genuinely wanted to see what this ability could achieve when it reached the 7th level. I couldn't imagine it, but I knew it would be something truly colossal. Then, in those few moments of thought, detached from reality, I felt a strange saturation, as if the mask had finished transmitting all its information into my mind. And then, as if by magic, my consciousness was swept away, completely severed from the real world, thrown into a sea of darkness. The scene kept shifting until I suddenly found myself standing in a completely different place than where I had been just moments ago. That's when weakness overtook me, and I collapsed to my knees before the sight that unfolded before my eyes. And after a few brief moments, despair finally consumed me. The moment he put on the mask, Fry froze in place, unable to move. He looked like a soulless statue. His black armor, the nameless mask, and that white hair of his. The engineer found himself staring at him for some time, the faint blue light flickering within his cold eyes. The engineer had always hidden his face, revealing only his icy gaze. Rarely did those eyes show any trace of emotion, no matter what circumstances he had endured through his long life. But this was one of those rare moments that stirred even a man weathered by the passage of ages. When he looked at him, it felt like he was witnessing the culmination of bitter struggles and relentless efforts that had torn his body apart, scattering his soul across countless places, leaving him with his fair share of suffering and despair, depths of pain that Fry could never even begin to imagine. What did the few short years of Frey's struggle amount to, compared to the millennia the blue-eyed man had endured? What weight did the fleeting struggles of a mere human carry against a battle that spanned thousands of years? It wasn't fair to the blue-eyed man. Perhaps no one else was insane enough to keep pursuing such a mad plan, one that he himself had drawn long ago. But, cruelly enough, just seeing Fry wearing that mask made the engineer feel satisfied, as if all he had done until now hadn't been in vain. After all, Fry had no idea just how much he resembled him now, that nameless king who once lived in the forgotten ages, carving his name into the annals of legend. And after staring for a while longer, the engineer realized he had let his emotions carry him away. He pulled himself back to that familiar cold facade, just as another figure appeared beside him. A towering dark statue with an angry face. "Watch him, in case anything happens," the blue-eyed man said curtly, while Angry simply nodded, holding his massive double-headed scythe. Then, in less than a second, the engineer vanished, returning to what he had been doing from the start. Continuing to build the sect, which by now had grown to a terrifying size, nearly rivaling the imperial capital of Belgrade, and was on the verge of surpassing it. No one knew what the engineer was constructing in that place, but one thing was certain: it was something dark beyond imagination. Back to Fry Starlight. This time, Fry found himself plunging into a whole new kind of despair. What in the creator of hell is this? The nameless mask had already finished transferring all of its knowledge into Frey's mind. But fully comprehending that knowledge was simply impossible for him, so the mask visualized it in a way that allowed him to access it whenever he wished. And this is what led Fry to his current predicament. Standing in the middle of a vast, illusory world, he found himself inside an enormous library. Its towering shelves pierced the sky above. When Fry looked up toward the heavens, all he could see were endless books, blocking the sky entirely. Then, taking a few hesitant steps forward and gazing downward, he saw an abyss of books stretching below him, its depths unfathomable. It was like standing inside a colossal skyscraper, with floors both above and below ground. Except here, the floors were infinite in both directions, upward and downward. This was what it meant to possess knowledge as vast as the universe itself. Am I seriously supposed to find the answer somewhere in this damned, endless sea of books? The more he looked at this bizarre library, the deeper despair took root in his heart, mixed with growing frustration at what he saw. He had no clue where to start searching if he wanted to find the solution to save Danzo. Perhaps the answer he sought was hidden inside one of those books. But which one was it? Was it close by? Far away? At the top? At the bottom? The longer he stared, the clearer it became just how hopeless this task truly was. This all depends entirely on luck. Among millions of books, he might find the one he sought on the very first shelf. Or could be buried at the very last. Either way, he had only about 20 days left. And that wasn't nearly enough to cover even a tenth of this monstrous library. His chances were painfully slim, and with every second that passed, his despair deepened. But Fry didn't sit idle. He immediately rushed forward, grabbing book after book, reading their contents as quickly as he could. Chapter 432. The Weight of Cosmic Knowledge, 2. There were no titles on the covers of those dark volumes, and the information inside wouldn't appear until he opened them and flipped through their pages one by one, which meant he had no choice but to go through them all if he wanted to find what he was looking for. But no matter how many books he opened, every single one spoke of the same subject. After hours upon hours of non-stop reading, Fry finally slammed a book shut and shouted in frustration, "What's with all this damned teleportation and space manipulation?" Even after spending so much time searching, it was always the same subject over and over again. Fry tried changing floors, hoping to escape it, but no matter where he went, he found himself facing the same thing. On the first floor, the 10th floor, the 50th floor, the knowledge about teleportation kept showing up wherever he went, almost as if someone was deliberately toying with him. Sure, teleportation was a powerful ability, but for Fry, who was searching for a way to save his friend, it was nothing more than a waste of precious time. Forced to learn and memorize all this information, Fry suddenly remembered the vision he once saw of Nameless back in Launder. Back then, he clearly witnessed how teleportation and space manipulation were the very first things Nameless sought to master in his life. All for the sake of escaping his planet during the demon invasion. The teleportation ability belonged to the mysterious law of space, and Nameless had managed to create a powerful technique in that complex field all on his own. Now, wearing the mask of that enigmatic man, Fry found himself wondering as he flipped through yet another book. Am I really going to be forced to relive everything that man experienced in his lifetime? In order. If that was true, then it was nothing short of a nightmare for Fry. And so, the hours passed one after another. Fry couldn't remember the last time he had consumed this much information in a single sitting. Eventually, it felt like his head was about to explode. Even though his mind automatically absorbed every bit of knowledge that crossed his eyes, he had barely scratched the surface of this ocean of information. The answer he was searching for drifted further and further from his reach. And realizing the bitter truth of his own naivety, Fry crashed headfirst into harsh reality once again. After all, how could he possibly replicate that man's knowledge so easily? It was simply impossible. Even if he spent his entire life flipping through those books, that knowledge had taken Nameless an unimaginably long time to gather. Nameless was immortal, unaffected by the passage of time, which meant the years he devoted to learning were limitless. Unlike Fry, a mere human, who now had no more than 20 days at best to meet the deadline. All he needed was a single piece of information, one answer capable of saving his friend. But that answer was lost within this endless sea of books. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Fry continued to stumble through that world in vain, endlessly learning about teleportation, a subject he had no interest in whatsoever. When Fry finally moved again in the real world, the darkness of the sky had long faded, replaced by the light of the distant midday sun. But it was already the third day. As Fry opened his eyes, tearing the mask from his face, dark circles had formed beneath his eyes, and exhaustion racked his body as though he'd been fighting for days without rest. As his senses slowly adjusted to reality, the first thing his eyes saw were the dark buildings of the sect, and the figures of Angry and the engineer, which only fueled the anger swelling within his chest. "So you've discovered the truth," the engineer said coldly. "So you knew all along." Fry forced himself to stand, struggling against the mental exhaustion as he stepped toward the engineer. "How the hell am I supposed to find the answer I'm looking for in all that filth?" The worst part was that he was forced to learn in the order the library dictated, not in the order he wanted. The engineer simply shook his head, shining a light on Fray's ignorance. "I told you, the knowledge you seek is there, but finding it, that's entirely up to you." Hearing this, Fry realized the engineer had known this would happen from the very start. "You could have just told me that from the beginning. Damn you. How am I supposed to find what I need, when all I ever get from that place is teleportation and spatial manipulation nonsense?" It was completely absurd. Despite spending several days inside, the only thing he came away with was knowledge of teleportation. You'll have to learn how to reach what you want by yourself. That imaginary world you saw was merely something your mind created to make the search easier. Whether you succeed or fail is entirely on you. Fry already understood what the engineer meant. The library wasn't real. It was an imaginary space within his mind, like a storage file containing all the knowledge he had yet to absorb. But even knowing all that, he still couldn't find the answer. Annoyed by the entire ordeal, Fry stood back up. How the hell did that bastard pull it off again? He muttered bitterly, before a violet light engulfed his body, wrapping him in a strange stellar aura. Then, in the blink of an eye, Fry vanished completely before the stunned gaze of the engineer, whose eyes widened in shock, unable to process what he had just witnessed. Fray's presence had disappeared entirely, and at that very moment, they both felt him reappear behind them, causing the engineer and angry to spin around instantly. At the same time, a deafening crash erupted behind them as Fry collided with the wall of one of the dark buildings. Amidst the rubble and dust, Fry slowly got up, clutching his head. Damn it! I messed up the destination coordinates. Though he looked frustrated by what had just happened, it didn't erase the shock on the blue-eyed man's face. There's no doubt about it. He spoke without thinking. Even though it was far weaker, so weak it wasn't even worth comparing. That was still nameless spatial manipulation. In just a few days, he's already managed to grasp an ability like that. His progress was ridiculously fast. Beyond anything the engineer had anticipated. But Fry didn't care about any of that. After experiencing it firsthand, he quickly lost interest and placed the mask back on his face. I don't have much time left. Every second that passed was precious, irreplaceable for Fry, who had a goal he was determined to reach no matter the cost. Ignoring the crushing exhaustion, he dove back into that imaginary world once more. And there he was again, standing within the mysterious library. He had already read countless books, and yet countless more remained, waiting for him. Fully aware of this, Fry resumed his endless search, roaming back and forth, trying to grasp the ancient knowledge that had long been lost to the ages. At that moment, Fry had no idea that his every move was being watched by those unseen eyes. Eyes that observed him from one of the upper floors of the endless library. Every motion, every step Fry took. None of it escaped that distant gaze. From behind the slits of a dark mask, he simply watched in silence, while Fry remained completely unaware of his presence. Though both of them gazed upon the world through the same cold openings of that mask, what they saw was vastly different. For Fry, the future was still clouded in uncertainty, filled with countless unanswered questions, as he continued to stumble in the darkness below, running blindly down a tunnel lit by nothing but a faint, fragile thread of hope, always trying to reach the other side, just as he always had. Chapter 433. Perfect Affection 1. Fry Starlight's POV. For more days passed in the blink of an eye. This marked the 9th day I hadn't slept since escaping from the Ultras continent. The dark circles beneath my eyes grew worse by the hour, deepening as I spent all my time buried in these complicated books, flipping through their endless pages one after another. I was never much of a reader, but I found myself unable to stop, desperately searching for a way to save Danzo. But time was far too short. It showed me no mercy. And so far, all I'd found was an endless stream of information about teleportation and spatial manipulation. Teleportation was supposed to be an ordinary ability, governed by the laws of space. But somehow, Nameless had turned it into a world-breaking power. He could appear anywhere in the universe at any time, instantly. That was just one of his incredible abilities. No wonder he was able to teleport from planet to planet. That was something I'd learned after combing through all these dense books that spoke of Nameless history. How many world-breaking abilities had he possessed? In this world, Agaroth held the most if we were speaking strictly in terms of numbers. But Nameless had owned quite a few himself. Both of them stood at the pinnacle of the world's power. Closing yet another book, I gazed at the countless shelves still waiting for me. Endless. Nameless had spent thousands of years gathering this knowledge, taking advantage of his immortal, ageless existence. What did I hope to accomplish in the few days I had left? As despair gradually crept in, I found myself stumbling through my thoughts, lost and aimless. I told you already, everything you see in that imaginary world is just an illusion your mind created. You simply have to let what you seek float to you. Sitting in one of the dimly lit buildings, the engineer leaned against a wall as he spoke. Blue eyes as always. I scowled automatically. You say that like it's the easiest thing in the world. I've been trying for days. Damn it. I cursed again without thinking. Honestly, it felt like I'd returned to the madness of my early days in this place. More than 2 years ago. Staying here wasn't doing my mental health any favors. If you keep doing what you're doing now, you'll never find your answer. And why do you care whether I succeed or fail? Wouldn't it suit you better if Danzo died and I lost more of my emotions? You know, so I'd end up like your damned king. I tried provoking him, but the engineer remained still, his expression unreadable. Come to think of it. Here we were, under the same roof, surrounded by the same walls. I never imagined I'd spend this much time with him. My hatred for him used to make me attack him on sight. But those feelings had started to calm, especially now that I'd gotten some answers to my questions and uncovered new ones that still needed answering. To be honest, I was starting to feel a bit curious about this man. I saw in the mask's memories. Nameless kept saving all of you, preventing your deaths time and time again. You're just one of the people he saved, aren't you? The engineer nodded. That's right. Then what's your name? What were you before he saved you? I'm curious. Before Nameless placed his soul into his current vessel, the engineer must have lived a long life, reaching a very high level of power. I couldn't help but feel some curiosity about his past. But he simply shook his head. I abandoned my name and identity long ago. That's what it means to be part of the Nameless sect. Staring at his scarred, worn-out hand, Blue Eyes spoke quietly. Now I'm only the engineer. Hearing that, I looked at him, unsure what to say. Seriously? He was proud of a name like that? Wasn't I the one who called him that on a whim? I should have just called you son of a bitch instead of wasting my breath with this crap, I said flatly as I scrolled through the system interface. I had gained a new ability. Teleportation. But the system still held countless unknowns. Like those 3 items. The mask, the shield, and the sword. They were known as the fragments of the lost self, and I had only recovered one of them so far. Remembering all that, I decided to ask about them too. But, as expected, the engineer shook his head. I won't answer. As expected of you. I sighed softly, still able to hear the chaotic sounds of construction echoing through the air. Are you trying to start a war with everything you're building here? The Shadow Sect had grown terrifyingly large by now. Large enough to house all the residents of Belgrad's capital if needed. And yet, I still couldn't understand his true intentions. As always, he gave no answer. Just leave and go back to your construction work. I gestured for him to leave me alone, then placed the mask on my face once again. Thus began another round of exhaustive searching. But once again it was futile. After absorbing so much information, my body weakened instinctively. My mind could no longer endure the flood of knowledge pouring into it. The dark circles under my eyes were darker than ever, and a sharp headache gripped me, followed by a crushing wave of fatigue. But no matter how hard I tried to sleep, my eyes refused to close. What the hell is wrong with this damned insomnia? Sitting atop one of the skyscrapers the engineer had built, I gazed quietly at the sky, trying to find a moment of rest. But the headache refused to let up. I want to leave this depressing place. Staying here wasn't doing my deteriorating mental state any favors. Apparently, the engineer overheard that, prompting him to step in. You can leave any time you want, using the teleportation ability you gained here. He spoke bluntly, and I frowned in response. What are you talking about? I can barely teleport short distances without crashing into whatever surround me. How do you expect me to pull it off across such a vast distance? True, my control over teleportation had improved, but achieving something like that in such a short time was still impossible. But the engineer, as always, had a solution. You can teleport to places where people who hold a high affection score toward you are located. If you use the third-person perspective, you'll see exactly where they are. He pointed out something crucial. Hearing that, I realized how obvious it was. You're right. Even though I was still a beginner, combining it with my other abilities would make teleporting that far possible. But I can't just leave yet. There are still many answers I want from you, I said, doubtful. The engineer answered immediately. Then leave a marker here and save its coordinates. The marker won't last forever, but it will give you enough time to return later. Again, he was right. He'd just given me the perfect way to leave and return later. But I couldn't help wondering, What exactly was Blue Eyes after? What are you really trying to achieve? I asked unconsciously, prompting him to repeat his usual answer like a broken record. I won't answer. Forget it, then. I waved him off and opened my system interface. That engineer was hopeless. And then, checking the newly updated affection system, I scanned through everyone, wondering who I should teleport to right now. Uriel Platini, 50 points. Danzo Smasher, 50 points. Snow Lionheart, 50 points. Ghost Umbra, 50 points. Ada Starlight, 99 points. Sansa Valerian, 100 points. Maxed out. Chapter 434. Perfect Affection, 2. The moment I saw those stats, Sansa's name caught my eye, sending a chill down my spine. 100 points? I blurted out unconsciously. This was the first time I had ever seen such an absurdly high number. Even my sister Ada had stopped at 99 points. But somehow Sansa had surpassed even that. I opened her profile description and regretted it instantly. Sansa Valerian, 100 points. Sansa sees you as the most important person in her life. As long as you are alive, she will keep living. If you die, she will die as well. The 99-point barrier was broken when the host unknowingly fulfilled Sansa Valerian's hidden desire. As a result, the host has obtained the love of the princess. However, be warned. One can never predict a demon. Abilities unlocked at max affection. You can temporarily control Sansa's body through the third-person perspective. You can communicate telepathically with her and make her aware of your presence. You can fully read her thoughts. Staring at those newly unlocked abilities, I couldn't help but let out a sigh. 100 points. I never imagined such feelings could ever form between me and Sansa. That number, 100, was terrifying in its own way, but I pushed it aside for now. I needed to focus on the task at hand and leave that mess for later. Using the third-person perspective, I checked on each of them one by one, searching for the right person to teleport to. Ada was in what seemed like a large meeting with several people, so going to her wasn't an option. I decided to avoid the princess for now as well. And I couldn't teleport to Danzo's location either. Suddenly appearing inside the Silver Dragon's base would only cause trouble. Turns out Snow was with Danzo at the moment too, so he was out as well. That left me with Ghost. He was moving stealthily through the streets of Belgrade, buying random daily necessities and stuffing them into giant black bags, walking quietly through the dark alleys. I had no idea what Ghost was up to right now, but I decided he'd be my target. So, without warning, I used the teleportation I'd learned from those books. Vanishing from sight, I left the Shadow Sect behind for now and returned to the Empire. What should have been a difficult teleportation succeeded with ease, thanks to the support of the third-person perspective. When I appeared in front of him, I saw shock flash across Ghost's face as he instinctively prepared to attack. But he quickly calmed down, realizing who had just appeared before him. "Fry? Where did you come from?" he asked, suspicious, while I scratched my head. Standing together in a deserted alley, with no one else around, I realized I had chosen the right person. Ghost preferred to remain in the shadows most of the time. "I guess I've unlocked a new ability, teleportation and spatial manipulation," I said, focusing on him. "What are you doing out here anyway?" I asked, gesturing toward the black bags. Ghost glanced at me, then at the bags, his eyes revealing a flicker of doubt. After all, he had no idea how I'd found him despite his high-level stealth. But eventually he gave in, accepting that I was far from ordinary. "Since you've already found me, there's no point hiding it from you." He spoke calmly as usual. "Follow me." "To where?" I asked quickly, but Ghost offered no further explanation. And so, the two of us continued through the alleys of the capital, delving deeper and deeper into its shadows. After a few more minutes of walking, Ghost came to a stop, his eyes fixed on a worn-down wooden house nearby. "What is it?" I asked, but Ghost motioned for me to stay put as he approached the old house. He knocked on the door and stood still, waiting for someone to open. Then, a few seconds later, As the door slowly creaked open, Ghost vanished into thin air, leaving the black bags on the ground. From behind the door, a woman appeared. She looked to be in her mid-30s. Her hair was jet black, and her skin pale and unhealthy. She lived alone, and life had clearly been hard on her. But she immediately grabbed the bags Ghost had left, slamming the door shut with force. It was as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment, hoarding the supplies to survive on her own. Her reaction made it clear. This wasn't the first time Ghost had come here. It meant he'd been taking care of her for a long time. Those black bags were packed with all the essentials for living, bringing her immeasurable relief. Watching it all from a distance, I saw Ghost reappear beside me, a complicated expression crossing his face. I couldn't help but ask, "Who is she?" It was a fair question, and Ghost didn't take long to answer, shocking me in the process. "She's my mother." "Your mother?" I blurted out again, unable to hide my surprise, as Ghost nodded. "I don't get it. Isn't the Shadow Court supposed to kill the mothers of all the children inside it?" Honestly, I'd believed Ghost's mother had died long ago, leaving him only with his father, Mist Umbra. Depriving children of their mothers was the Shadow Court's cruel way of creating strong assassins. That's why I thought Ghost was no exception. But he simply shook his head. "That's just a lie they feed us to make us live in despair. By making them believe their mothers were dead, the Shadow Court forged assassins shaped by loneliness and pain. For generations. But Ghost was far too sharp. He uncovered the lie on his own. He even managed to follow the trail that Mist Umbra, his father, used to track his mother, tracing it until he found her still alive. Yet even though he found her, he couldn't approach her or speak to her. If he did, the court, always watching, might kill her without hesitation. He had barely managed to stay hidden from their sight. So, Ghost had no choice but to watch her from a distance, helping her however he could, hoping, perhaps, that one day he might finally embrace his mother. "What a cursed system," I muttered without hesitation. According to Ghost, Mist Umbra had married many women, searching for the perfect heir. And that heir was Ghost. But Mist forced him to stay away from his mother, never letting him get close. It was a truly miserable situation. "What if they discover you know where she is?" I asked without thinking. Ghost shook his head. "They won't do anything to her as long as I don't speak to her or interact with her." He spoke with that blank face of his again, quickly hiding whatever real feelings lay beneath. But then, staring straight at me, he shifted the conversation to something else entirely. "Isn't it about time you told me what's going on?" "What do you mean?" I deflected, answering his question with a question, but Ghost pressed harder. "I know something happened to Danzo, so stop hiding it and tell me. What exactly is wrong with him?" The silent assassin. Always perceptive as ever. Chapter 435. A Familiar Face 1. Fry Starlight's POV. Leaning against the wall of a dim alleyway, Ghost and I stood out to every passerby. This place was as run down as you'd expect from one of Belgrad's poorest districts. And yet, this was where the Shadow Court had chosen to abandon Ghost's mother. The court was always searching for the most efficient ways to create assassins, arranging calculated breeding to pass down nothing but genetics. As a result, all of Ghost's siblings shared the same father, Mist Umbra, but were born of different mothers. And once the mothers had fulfilled their sole purpose, giving birth, the court discarded them, stripping the children of any trace of affection or warmth. This was how they raised cold-blooded killers, molded solely for death. But for Ghost, it was far worse. He didn't just lose his friends at the court. He lost his siblings, one after another. The last one was Atlas Umbra, who died right before his eyes. And yet, Ghost didn't seem affected. He had simply grown used to it. It was a harsh reality for the silent assassin, but it was what shaped him into the man he was now. His resilience and composure in the face of such darkness were, in their own way, admirable. That's what made him so sharp. Always aware of the smallest details. And that sharpness had led him to ask about Danzo. "What made you ask that question?" I turned the question back on him, and he replied calmly. It was obvious watching you. Every time you looked at him, there was regret in your eyes. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together. At first, I thought you were just mourning what happened to him. But when your sadness lingered for too long, I realized something far bigger was happening. Something none of us knew about. He had figured all that out through observation alone. And he waited for the right moment to ask. A moment that came the second I appeared in front of him from thin air. You really are sharp, I said, gazing up at the sky. He was right. Much like Sansa, he'd read me perfectly, even though I thought I was hiding it well. Staring at Ghost, I wondered if I should tell him the truth. There wasn't much an assassin like him could do to help me save Danzo. If anything, he'd be more suited to killing him. And that was exactly what I was trying so hard to avoid. But Ghost was Danzo's friend too. Even though they fought often, the bond between them was real. In our bleak little circle, Danzo was the only source of energy and life. That made him special in his own way. Ghost deserved to know. And after all, he had accompanied me once on my journey to Launder. What if I told you there's a demon living inside him? Ghost? I dropped the words suddenly. Ghost's eyes widened for a moment, but he quickly regained his calm. What are you talking about? It's a devil seed. And in that moment, I began explaining everything to him. The truth of the malicious demonic entity dwelling inside our crippled, sick friend. And that soon that demon would emerge, threatening everyone around him. Ghost listened silently to the entire story, saying nothing. But I could see his expression shift as I gave him more and more details. You're telling me a demon like that is inside him, and not even Saint Candidate Uriel noticed? I nodded. You could say, he will become the demon himself. It's not a separate being inside him. This level of fusion can't be detected, not even by holy power. All anyone can do is fight him when the time comes. The cursed one who invented the devil seed made it so perfect, so seamless, that it fully merged with the host's body, making it impossible to detect. I don't get it, Fry. If even Uriel couldn't sense it, how did you? It was a fair question, and I couldn't blame Ghost for not being satisfied. After all, my reaction had been far worse when I first saw the system's final quest. Let's just say, I have my own ways. I answered briefly. I couldn't tell him about the system, not yet. So I had no choice but to leave it at that. Whether he believed me or not, I couldn't blame him either way. Ghost, as always, was unreadable. His face gave nothing away. Even his reply was short. I see. That was all he said. And then, silence filled the space between us. He took his time thinking, glancing at me every so often. His eyes fell on the dark circles beneath mine, on the exhaustion written all over my body. Then, remembering all the madness we'd gone through together, Ghost made his decision. He chose to believe me. I was certain of it. Because I had caught a glimpse of his thoughts, using the third-person perspective ability. So what do we do then? How can we save him? He asked directly, wanting to help. But unfortunately, this was something only I could accomplish. I'm working on it. I went on to tell Ghost about the nameless mask, and how the way to save Danzo was hidden somewhere inside it. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't grasp it. I'm the only one who can save him, Ghost. No one else. His fate rested entirely in my hands. And the weight of it was crushing me. As we walked side by side, we kept talking about it for a while longer. How's Danzo been lately? I asked, since it had been a while since I last saw him. He's still broken. Honestly, I can't get used to this new, quiet Danzo. It was nothing like the energetic Danzo we used to know. Now, he was far too quiet, looking tired most of the time, unable to walk properly, like a ghost of his former self. If he ever wanted to fight again, there was no hope left in his human body. Humans simply couldn't repair shattered aura pathways. But staying alive this way was still far better than dying in the form of a demon. That thought had haunted me lately, and the same went for Ghost, who couldn't do anything to help this time. I wanted to visit Danzo again. Maybe seeing him would push me to search even harder in that cursed library Nameless had built. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a sound I hadn't heard in a very long time, coming from my stomach. Ah! It was rare to feel hunger in this mutated body of mine. "You're hungry?" Ghost asked, and I replied, "I suppose so. If you counted all the days I spent in the Ultras continent, plus the days after our return and my time in the Shadow Sect, you could say I had gone nearly a whole month without eating anything, surviving on barely a few hours of sleep. I had pushed my body far beyond its limits. I should have died long ago if I were still a normal human, but the only thing it left me with was some hunger growls. What a cursed body!" I muttered with a tired smile. Chapter 436. A Familiar Face. 2. "Let's go find something to eat." There were a few nearby restaurants, Ghost pointed out. I wasn't really in the mood to eat, but I followed him anyway, hoping I could forget, even for a little while, about Danzo and the endless flood of information I had been drowning in. "The restaurants around here aren't anything special, but they'll fill you up," Ghost said, and I replied carelessly, "Anything will do." In the poor streets of Belgrade, there were plenty of street vendors and open food stalls scattered around. I glanced at them all with a blank face. Food hadn't appealed to me in a long time, so I decided to just pick one at random. But as we walked a little further, I found myself stopping dead in my tracks as something caught my eye at the end of the street. I rubbed my eyes quietly, trying to steady myself. I was exhausted. Maybe I was hallucinating. But no, I wasn't imagining things. The scene was real. Among the various food stalls, there was one in particular with a decent crowd gathered around it, thick smoke rising from its tiny stand that still clung to its old traditions. Serving a line of customers, a fat old man rushed around, taking orders one after another, his thick beard and rough features exactly as I remembered them. "What is it?" Ghost stopped too when he noticed me frozen in place, but I couldn't help but laugh quietly. "So you're still alive, you damned old man," I said with a smile, making my way toward him. "We found what we were looking for, Ghost." There was no way I could just pass him by after all this time. Maybe he had escaped back then. But the world really was a small place. "Fate brought me back to you once again, Shaheen." And with that, I stepped into his new restaurant. In that moment, without warning, everyone inside turned to stare at us as Shaheen dropped his iron ladle to the ground, freezing in place, shocked to see me walking in out of nowhere. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Shaheen. It's been a while," I said simply, as the old man stared at me in disbelief, rubbing his eyes repeatedly to make sure what he was seeing was real. But he quickly started screaming when the leftover spicy food on his hands burned his eyes, letting out a muffled cry. His eyes now bright red from the heat, Shaheen spoke through the pain. "Fry? Ah, hello. I didn't expect to see you." Flustered, the old man took a long moment to calm himself down. "Go wash your face first, old man. We'll be waiting for you at one of your tables. Then we can talk." I waved him off and took a seat at one of the wooden tables, Ghost beside me, silently observing everything. Shaheen was still clearly shaken. You could see it in the frantic way he nodded before trying to pick up his fallen ladle, only to drop it again. He really was hopeless, but I couldn't help feeling happy to see him alive and bustling, just like always. It took Shaheen a full 30 minutes to gather his courage and finally sit down in front of us. He was so late that I almost wanted to scold him for the terrible service. But I didn't. I remembered how places like this, back before my reincarnation, were just as slow. In that way too, he hadn't changed. Even when he finally joined us, silence filled the air, the three of us just staring at one another. Ghost sat between us, shifting his gaze back and forth. First to me, then to Shaheen, then back to me again, then Shaheen, who was starting to sweat. The silence dragged on until I stood up abruptly and slammed the table over him. "What's wrong with you, damned old man? Are you my ex-girlfriend or what? Say something, for God's sake." Trying to crush him beneath the table, Shaheen grabbed it firmly and shoved back at me. You filthy brat. Is that how you treat your elders? I was actually embarrassed to face you. You know? I wanted to apologize and give you some free food. But now the only thing you're getting is my hairy old ass. Oh, so now you're offering your ass to strangers. Huh. Filthy old man? No wonder you've got all these customers. Your mouth's gotten bigger, kid. Maybe I should cut it off for you. We shouted at each other in front of all the customers, both of us wrestling with the table. I could have easily overpowered him, but I deliberately used the same amount of strength as him, making our ridiculous struggle perfectly even. And after a few more minutes of nonsense, we finally set the table down again and sat back in our seats. Let's do this properly, kid, he said with a serious face, and I nodded. Go on, then. With a nod, Shaheen began to apologize. I'm sorry, kid, for disappearing like that after our last conversation. He bowed his head sincerely, but I quickly lifted his head back up with aura control from afar. No need to apologize. I see you've left the past behind. There's nothing to regret. You've done what I couldn't. Shaheen had spent his whole life trapped in the temple, haunted by the ghost of his dead daughter, imprisoning himself within the walls of the past. But he managed to break free from those chains. And here he was now. Look at you. Your restaurant's thriving, you've got dozens of customers. I'm glad life has been kind to you, old man, I said with a smile, and Shaheen narrowed his eyes at me. That's thanks to you, kid. Your words that day gave me the push I needed. Even so, I left without saying a word to you. I do feel a little guilty about that. I hope you won't hold it against me. Shaheen spoke sincerely, regret lingering in his voice, unable to speak the full truth. But I already knew what he meant, so I spared him the trouble of saying it aloud. Without realizing it, Shaheen had treated me like a son. Maybe back then, he used me to fill the void his dead daughter left behind. And that's what built the bond between us. But it was only a temporary escape from reality. That's why Shaheen left me behind when he decided to start over. If I had stayed by his side, he might never have left the temple at all. But I didn't blame him for what he did. It was a necessary step for him, and I respected his decision. In the end, we understood each other, and that was what mattered. Shaheen nodded with a soft smile, regaining his usual composure. You look hungry. Should I bring you the usual? He asked with a grin, and I nodded. Yeah, the usual. For me and my friend here. Got it. Ha ha ha. Letting out his signature pirate-like laugh, Shaheen marched back into the kitchen, brimming with energy. Watching him from behind, I couldn't help but laugh quietly too. I was truly happy to see him again. Chapter 437. Despair. Fry Starlight's POV. Taking a spoonful from his bowl of spicy food, Ghost's usually calm face visibly twisted with discomfort. What exactly do you people like about this stuff? He asked, glancing around at the old men and locals who were happily devouring the same dish, their faces radiating pure joy. This is the food of real men, kid. No place here for the weak. Ha ha ha. Shaheen laughed heartily, making his rounds between the tables, taking orders from everyone. Even though Ghost had barely managed a single bite, Fry had already finished his entire bowl. You finished it that fast? Ghost asked in confusion, clearly baffled. He had lived a hard life, forced at times to eat grass just to survive. But even then, he had never tasted anything as fiery as what was now burning in his hands. You should have ordered something else, Ghost. This kind of spicy food is one of a kind. Either you fall in love with it and devour it, or you can't stand it and leave it untouched. There's no middle ground. Fry spoke with a rare smile, something he hadn't shown in a long time, as he signaled for Shaheen to bring him another dish. Coming right up. Ha ha ha. Fry, I see you still appreciate real spicy food. You have my respect. Don't underestimate me, old man. I'm tougher than you think. Ha ha. We'll see about that. Shaheen disappeared into the kitchen again, while Fry and Ghost sat quietly at their table. The atmosphere around them was loud and chaotic, like a public cafe watching a football match, a sport that had vanished hundreds of years ago. The noise was overwhelming, but somehow, Fry found himself genuinely at ease in this environment. Unlike him, Ghost seemed clearly annoyed, but he chose to let Fry enjoy this rare moment of peace. "I'm glad to see you like this again, Fry. But I have to ask, what do you plan to do now?" Ghost was clearly talking about Danzo. Hearing that, Fry lifted his head, gazing up at the sky. "I'll save him, Ghost. I'll save him." So far, nothing in this life had gone the way he wanted. The world had always pushed back against everything he tried to accomplish. Fry had never forgotten the death of Clanna Starlight. He could still remember the warmth of her body in those final moments as she died in his arms. She hadn't meant much to him, and yet she had died to save him. It felt like her life had been wasted on someone like him. That was a burden he never wanted to carry again. "I'll save him, no matter what it takes." Danzo's fate rested entirely in his hands, and he intended to carry that responsibility to the end. Final mission. Time remaining: 17 days. That day, Fry visited his sick friend once again, with Ghost by his side. Several other elite students came to visit as well. And by chance, Ceres was there this time, having finally finished her duties toward her family. The princess of the Moonlight family remained as calm as ever, but there was a clear maturity in her demeanor now. Due to the lack of church forces capable of using advanced holy power, Ceres hadn't yet recovered her severed arm, instead using a handcrafted from pure ice. Wearing her black coat, she nodded to Fry, and he did the same. After everything they had been through, an unspoken respect had grown between them, allowing them both to leave their hatred behind. Whether it was Ceres letting go of what Fry had once done to her, or Fry setting aside his grudge against the Moonlight family and its tangled past. Between them, Danzo sat quietly on his bed. His skin looked much better than before, but he was still pale compared to what he once was. "I'll be leaving now. I'll give you some space." Having seen Fry and Ghost arrive, Ceres didn't want to intrude, so she left quietly. "I'm glad to see you're still alive and well, Danzo. I wish you the best." In response to her kind words, Danzo simply nodded. "Thank you." And just like that, Ceres left, leaving only Fry and Ghost behind with Danzo. The man spent his remaining days in complete peace, unaware of the monster lurking inside him. Fry Starlight's POV. Time was slipping away fast, especially when you needed it most. Barely half of the allotted time remained before the quest's deadline, and I hadn't made any progress so far, a reality that pushed me to my limits. I gave up sleep, abandoned all comfort, and poured every second I had into the nameless library, a place holding all of his knowledge and wisdom. Searching for a solution, I spent 23 out of every 24 hours inside that place. Leaving the last hour for Danzo, I visited him every day now. Our presence by his side seemed to bring back a little life to him. His body was visibly improving day by day, which made his father happy, and filled my heart with growing unease. As soon as my time with him was over, I would teleport straight back to the Shadow Sect and continue what I was doing. The sect had grown terrifyingly massive, its size breaking beyond the limits of the Black Mountain. Only God knew what that engineer was trying to build there. Time remaining: 16 days. The next day, I managed to get permission from Atom Smasher to take Danzo outside. Danzo was using a wheelchair. The weather had grown bitterly cold with the coming of winter, and it had been snowing and raining frequently. Adam had wrapped his son from head to toe in warm clothes, covering him completely. Danzo looked strange in that wheelchair of his, but I made sure not to show it on my face. Together with Ghost, the three of us went to Shaheen's new restaurant. Shaheen recognized Danzo instantly. He'd often visited the old man with me before, and he handled the situation well, saying nothing about Danzo's condition. Instead, he tried to lift his spirits, and I appreciated what the old man did. Thanks to him, I saw that familiar smile on my sick friend's face once again. Time remaining, 15 days. The knowledge about teleportation and spatial manipulation was so vast that even after 15 days, I still hadn't finished it. It frustrated me deeply. Nameless had somehow turned this knowledge into a world-breaking power, allowing him to transcend the very laws of space. He was a being capable of appearing anywhere in the world at will, a power beyond imagination. But because of that, I now found myself drowning in this endless field, unable to reach what I sought. The anxiety within me kept growing. The odds were against me, and the engineer did nothing to help me in my struggle. The dark circles under my eyes had worsened, and my head throbbed constantly. Spending 23 hours a day on this madness had drained me, but I had no choice. With each passing second, I felt myself inching closer to collapse. Time remaining, 12 days. The Empire was undergoing great changes. The Iron Emperor, Sir Alone, was building a vast military force, reorganizing everything. Anyone who saw what he was doing would know. He was preparing for a brutal war soon to come. The Iron Emperor wanted to meet me, according to what Ada told me. He had already met with all of my fellow elite classmates, but I simply ignored his invitation. I didn't have the time to waste on him. That night, I snuck into Danzo's room with Sansa once darkness fell. As soon as we arrived, Sansa let go of my hand and quietly approached the sleeping Danzo to check on him. With a single glance, she could tell what was happening. This isn't good. The devil seed has spread its roots completely inside him. The princess spoke quietly, though it was what I had feared. Can you suppress it? I asked. She nodded. I can, but only temporarily. In 10 days from now, I won't be able to stop the growing power inside him anymore. Turning to face me, Sansa spoke firmly. If we reach that point, we'll have to kill him, Fry. She was blunt and right, but I was determined to avoid that outcome at all costs. I'll take responsibility for him, so don't take any action on your own. I warned her firmly. She would likely try to kill him herself, sparing me from having to do it with my own hands. I knew she would. I had already read those thoughts inside her mind, and it seemed like she knew that I knew. After a long silence, she finally gave in. Fine. I promise I won't do anything without your knowledge. Thank you. I thanked her with a heavy sigh. There was much more to talk about. But we said nothing. We simply left. I hadn't seen much of Sansa lately. She had been busy with her own situation inside the Imperial family. A family where most of them wished her dead. She had her own problems just as I had mine. But we didn't burden each other. This time we fought our battles alone. Sansa had grown incredibly strong, so I was sure she'd find a way to deal with her situation somehow. But that didn't change the fact that I hadn't done anything to help her through her struggle. I'm sorry, Sansa. Time remaining, 10 days. 3 days later, I finally began to reach my limits. Trapped within the endless walls of the library, I felt an unbearable pain in my head, as if someone was forcing something into my brain. Hallucinations became frequent now. I could no longer tell left from right. I was just a tiny, insignificant speck in the vast ocean of existence, desperately trying to break through the crashing waves that swept me away without mercy, throwing me deep into the abyss. Gathering this much knowledge took thousands of years. What makes you think you can grasp it so quickly? That's what the engineer told me once. Nameless, with all his greatness and wisdom, spent millennia to reach this point. By what right did I think I could claim it for myself? Damn it all! I didn't want to acquire all that knowledge. I only wanted the smallest fraction of it. Just enough to achieve my goal. Let Nameless, his mask, and his knowledge all burn in hell. Why can't I grasp it? In a hysterical fit, I hurled the books everywhere, unable to reach what I sought. I was still stuck on the first floor, and beyond me were countless other floors, some piercing through the skies, others plunging deep into the earth below. I was starting to lose them, Danzo, and my mind. Time remaining, 7 days. Chapter 438. The Price of Life and Death. 25 days had passed. Inside the Silver Dragon Guild, I stood frozen, unable to move, as its master and Danzo's father, Adam Smasher, embraced me tightly. "Thank you, my boy. Thank you for everything you've done for my only son." Hearing his words of gratitude, I didn't know what to say. It happened when I went to visit Danzo as usual, only to run into his father. Your presence brought a smile back to his face. You restored his energy and his health. I could never repay you for what you've done, but please accept my deepest thanks. As his massive arms pulled me into a crushing embrace, I saw tears welling in his eyes. It must have been hell for him, watching his son return to him as a broken shell. He had done everything he could, but in the end, it wasn't enough. And then one day I came alongside Uriel and brought his son back to life. To him, I must have looked like a ray of hope piercing through the darkness surrounding them. My son didn't just gain a friend, he gained a brother. Thank you for everything you've done for him, Fry. With tired, hollow eyes blackened from exhaustion, and a clenched fist, I listened to his words, unable to give him any reply. Thank me for what, exactly? I wanted to ask him. I hadn't done anything for his son. Nothing at all. Danzo was the one who had helped me time and time again. He was the one who preserved what little humanity I still had left, the part of me I never wanted to lose. And now, when the chance finally came for me to return the favor, I stood powerless, receiving praise and gratitude from his father, who didn't even realize his son only had a few days left. You shouldn't be thanking me. You should be cursing me. I clenched my teeth, trying to hold myself together, trying to say something. But in the end, nothing came out. I was already nearing the breaking point, and so I just stood there, frozen, until Adam Smasher finally let me go. He smiled as he bid me farewell. Take care of each other, both of you. You're like sons to me now. No, Adam. No, you're so wrong. Your only son is the one lying in that bed. No one else. Time remaining, 5 days. Relentless effort does not guarantee success. No matter how hard you try, no matter how much of yourself you pour into it, success is never promised. It's always out of reach. Only 3 days left. Only 3 days remained. Just a few fleeting hours separated me from facing the turning point. A point that could break something deep inside me. I'm exhausted. Lying there in the library of existence, isolated and alone in its vastness, I had finally reached my limit. I hadn't slept, hadn't rested, hadn't given in. I did everything I could, surrounded by endless books. And yet, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find the answer. Do you want me to kill him with these hands of mine? If death was his fate, then why was his life thrown onto my shoulders? If he had died somewhere far away in the Ultras continent, the pain wouldn't have been this bitter. I was afraid, and I was angry at how Danzo's life had been toyed with. Like some lab rat, his life prolonged on purpose just so it could end at the right time. He had lost to Gvardiel. He should have died then, but that damned hybrid kept him alive on purpose. And now I was the one suffering the consequences of his actions. What the hell am I even thinking? Forcing myself to stand, I rose again and looked around the endless space. I had reached my limit. There was nothing more I could do. After just a few seconds of standing, my legs gave out beneath me, and I collapsed to my knees on the ground, broken. Please, show me the way, I whispered, exhaling slowly. I beg you, just this once. Show me the way. Who was I even speaking to now? I didn't know, but I was drowning in exhaustion, buried beneath hopelessness. I couldn't think clearly anymore. The wounds on my body. Perhaps time could heal them, but the fear carved into my soul. Who would erase that? Fear of what was coming. Please, show me the way. If saving Danzo meant finding one book in this endless sea of knowledge, then no matter how much I searched, I would never find it. This entire place was just a space my mind had created. And so I begged myself to show me the way, to give me what I sought. It was meaningless, but if it showed anything, it was the depth of my despair. And then, to my shock, the impossible happened. Without warning, without my will, a miracle. It appeared from nowhere. I didn't know where it came from or how it had gotten here, but a black, ominous book rested in my hands. I didn't know if this was truly what I sought, but I found myself opening it desperately, frantically searching for the answer hidden inside. And the moment I opened it, my consciousness was thrown far away into another world of memories. You have touched the forbidden. There were laws upon which this world was built, laws the engineer had once spoken of. If I wanted to save Danzo, I realized I had no choice but to break one of those laws if I hoped to survive. The completed devil seed was something unique. A cursed tool invented by one of the most terrifying demons. A soul resided inside that seed. And unlike Sansa's incomplete seed, where the seed fused with the body, Danzo's seed had fused completely, and the soul had merged with him as well. They had become one, and one cannot become two. What I was trying to achieve was freeing Danzo from Danzo himself. That was neither realistic nor logical. In this world, escaping a completed devil seed was impossible. That's what I realized the moment I opened that book. What I was about to attempt to break was the law of life and death, the very same thing Nameless had once tried to defy. Opening that book, the past was illuminated before me, and my mind was torn apart by a cold voice that shook my soul. There is no life without death. I heard it clearly. Was that Nameless voice? Slowly, I began to sink into the truth. No life without death. That's what he said. So then, what had he done to reach that higher law that stood at the top of the world? And in that moment, I understood, and my expression darkened. As I stared at a horrifying sight unlike anything I had ever seen, my whole being trembled. What did you do? Blood, death, slaughter. With his own hands, he killed them one after another, ended their lives, snuffed out the flame of their existence. And then he defiled their corpses. Kill, 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 and then more killing, all to achieve what he desired, to satisfy that twisted, diseased passion of his. He did whatever it took to get what he wanted. What is this? I had never seen this before. The truth about Nameless. He wasn't some great king, like they called him. It was blood and for blood. He wasn't noble. He wasn't righteous. He wasn't anything like that. He was insane. Wherever Nameless went, disaster followed. Giant black birds would soar ominously in the sky wherever he appeared. And soon after, calamities would strike. He killed them. He killed every type of creature, one after another. Death, death, and more death, and even more death beyond that. He caught them all and dissected their corpses one by one, cut them down to the smallest pieces, until their blood became seas and oceans. Nameless spared no one, neither the weak nor the strong, neither the young nor the old, neither the poor nor the rich. He killed them all, and did whatever it took without hesitation to achieve what he sought. Blood, blood, and more blood. He never faltered, and he never stopped. Alone, he did what not even the demons themselves dared to do. Frozen in place before that terrifying sight, the horrifying experiments that entity carried out, I found myself stumbling backward, retreating in horror. I was naive. A king? A mighty warrior? Bullshit. How could I have forgotten? He was a monster as terrifying as Agaroth. To reach that level, there was no way he did it through normal means. He was insane, without limits or chains to bind him. As long as it meant achieving his goal, he would do anything, without a second thought. And so it led to a massacre, and oceans of blood. Staring at those catastrophes, I finally understood what had happened. He did it, and the demons bore the blame for what he had done. Realizing the truth, all I felt was disgust at what I had seen. His past was dark. But no one had ever truly known him, because he left no one alive to tell the tale. And so, the world thought the demons had committed these atrocities, because such horrors matched their ways. But the truth was far from that. The real monster was the man behind that dark mask. This was how Nameless challenged the law of life and death, and reached the level he had attained. Realizing this, despair washed over me. How was I supposed to comprehend what I had just seen? Those horrific experiments, that sea of slaughter, all for the sake of surpassing the limits of flesh and blood. This was the power I needed to save Danzo. But reality was far crueler than I imagined. Because to reach that insane level, I would have to sacrifice everything, become a monster like him, and do what he did, break the highest law of life and death. And that simply wasn't possible. Unlike teleportation, you couldn't learn this just by witnessing it. From the very beginning, there was never a way to succeed. When this book appeared before me, it wasn't offering me hope. It was offering me despair. Crushing the last shred of my will. I can't save him. I can't. Swallowed by the bitter truth, I finally sank into darkness, defeated once again. They were really going to make me do it. Make me kill Danzo. Chapter 439. The Fourth Seed Awakens. 1. The northern region of the human empire, Ashina Province. This was the uppermost border of the empire, a place where snow fell relentlessly all year round. In those frozen lands, there stood an old wooden house, once home to an elderly couple. Now it had become a grave that held one of them. Millicent, the old witch, had died after her defeat at the hands of Beatrice. She was quietly buried there, and few even knew she had been alive in the first place. Her story was a tragic one, but that didn't change the fact that she, together with her now absent husband, had once protected the northern borders. And without them, there was no longer a line of defense against one of the Nightmare Lords, the Abyss Watcher. This forced Sir Alone Valyrian to place a beast resembling the Nightmare Knights in her stead, to hold the line. And so, amidst the beautiful snowy fields, a fierce battle unfolded, spilling foul blood across the land without end. The Abyss Watchers charged in vast numbers, rusted swords in hand, desperately shielding themselves behind their tattered armor. But their defense was meaningless against the dark shadowy tendrils that swept them away one after another. Floating silently above them, her dozens of black tendrils stretching from her back, Sansa slaughtered the Abyss Knights without mercy, ripping them apart without pause. With every drop of their blood that splashed onto the snow, the smile on the demonic princess's face grew wider and wider, delighting in the bloodshed, drunk on the thrill of the hunt. As her murderous intent swelled with each passing moment, her shadow spread so rapidly that it engulfed the entire battlefield in the blink of an eye, and in less than a second, it transformed into sharp spikes, cold as black steel, piercing through the bodies of the Nightmare Knights, annihilating them with terrifying ease. This is boring. Weren't they supposed to be an SS plus threat? Sansa muttered with a frown, having effortlessly wiped out all the Abyss Watchers. She had been stationed here for days now, fighting the Abyss Knights day after day, slaughtering countless enemies. But they were far too weak, leaving her bored with the entire ordeal. The Abyss Watchers are a vast horde of nameless knights. Their strength varies from one to another. Only their leader has reached the SS plus level. A calm voice interrupted her from behind. Wearing his usual white mask, Oliver Kahn explained the truth about the Abyss Watchers. I see. Then let's go find their leader. Sansa smiled eagerly, but Oliver shook his head immediately. No. Your only task is to stay here and guard the border. You're so boring, Uncle Oliver. Are you trying to lock me up here or something? Sansa descended quietly from the sky, wearing her carefree smile, while Oliver remained silent. It was hard to read Oliver Kahn's thoughts or emotions since he wore a mask all the time, but his eyes said plenty. Though he was starting to accept the reality, he still couldn't stop his mixed expressions from surfacing whenever he looked at Sansa's dark horns. Her skin had grown paler, her hair now a white tinged with gray. Wearing that black dress she wove from shadows, she looked entirely demonic. Watching his only niece turn into a demon was hard for Oliver. It was far from easy, and with her heightened senses, Sansa had already seen all of that, which only deepened the tension between them. "It's the only way to keep you alive. That was the condition we agreed upon." Oliver changed the subject, reminding her of the necessity of staying in the north. Sansa simply shrugged indifferently, heading into the wooden cabin where Millicent and Vendrick once lived. Despite the growing tension between them, Sansa didn't care much. Her personality had changed. She was no longer the Princess Oliver once knew and loved. There was little left that could stir her now. Even exile from the Empire wouldn't faze her. Oliver honestly believed she wouldn't care in the slightest. In truth, even if she tried to escape, not even Sir Alone, with his light-speed sword, could stop her. She had grown far too strong. As befitting a demon, the current emperor wanted her dead. But an unexpected intervention changed the Iron Emperor's mind. Who would have thought the one to save her would be Aegon, of all people? Oliver Khan sighed in frustration, following Sansa into the cabin. Recalling what had happened before, the princess's transformation into a demon was unforgivable. A complete disgrace to House Valyrian, descendants of the first emperor who had sacrificed his life to save humanity. Her very existence was a stain on their legacy, and that was why Sir Alone had drawn his sword. Back then, Oliver Khan hadn't known what to do. He froze, unable to move. But unlike him, Aegon stood before the Iron Emperor and argued for his sister's life. Aegon Valyrian, the first to escape from the Ultras continent, and the only one to return without a single injury. A young man who had achieved so much in such a short time, quickly earning the Iron Emperor's favor. And so, he persuaded Sir Alone to spare Sansa's life, on the condition that her power would be used for the Empire. Even in a situation like this, Aegon Valyrian had managed to come up with the most beneficial plan. And it had worked perfectly. Sansa agreed to the prince's dubious proposal, becoming a secret weapon of the Empire, a tool wielded by the Iron Emperor and Aegon as they pleased. It all began with assigning her to guard the northern borders, for now. Sansa had become a demon, and Aegon secured his claim to the throne. It wouldn't be wrong to say the Empire is now in Aegon's hands. Staring up at the sky, Oliver Khan wondered with concern. What kind of future awaited the Empire when Aegon finally ascended the throne? The prince was certainly capable, but his true motives remained a complete mystery. Only God knew what dwelled within that mind of his. The fate of mankind had never been more uncertain, with a devastating war looming on the horizon. Anyone could see it now. A storm was coming. A storm that would change everything on this planet called Earth. On the other side of the world, where the Ultras lived, the land of the other humans. Those branded as traitors. That land had witnessed many events recently. Events that changed it forever. Perhaps the most important of them was the return of their supreme lord, whom all had thought dead, the human demon. Dragoth, driven mad ever since his crushing defeat at the hands of Abraham Starlight. He had finally begun to regain his composure after enduring endless torture throughout the past years. The return of such a beast to his senses only made the threat to the Empire even greater. Surrounded by Gavid Lindman and Murgo, the Supreme Lord of the Ultras was restored. Elsewhere, both Baelor Moonlight, the traitor, and Gvardiel officially rose to the rank of lords, after the deaths of Madame A and Godfrey. The Madame fell to Mikar's spear. As for Godfrey, the way he died remained unknown to this day. This time, the Ultras gathered their true strength, preparing for the war to come. Among their strongest, perhaps the most mysterious, was the warrior Draxler. This man wandered aimlessly through one of the deserts, his great sword resting on his back, his gaze fixed on a mountain far in the distance. After a long, tiresome journey, he finally reached his destination. There, inside one of the enormous caves, its entrance resembling the maw of a colossal beast, stood a refined woman, wearing a deep violet dress, her hands calmly folded together. "You've finally arrived." The woman spoke with a soft smile. "It was Beatrice. My apologies. It took me quite some trouble to find you, which caused the delay." Draxler bowed his head respectfully. He had known from the start that Beatrice would never die so easily, but finding her afterward had been a difficult task. He brushed his orange hair back, revealing 2 golden bracelets adorning his elbows. Then, with great care, he removed them, and his body shone with a blinding white light. In mere seconds, a dramatic transformation overtook the mysterious young man with golden teeth. His skin darkened into rough obsidian. His eyes became a mix of crimson and black, and a pair of black horns pierced through his orange hair, rising atop his head. "Rank 33 Draxler, at your service." In that moment, Draxler's true identity was revealed. One of the 72 demon seats, the holder of rank 33, and a direct servant of Beatrice. Well done." Beatrice smiled, gesturing for Draxler to follow her. "These enchanted bracelets hid my true form perfectly, Lady Beatrice, but they also limited my power greatly. It reduced my effectiveness on the battlefield." Draxler grumbled, complaining about the magical tool Beatrice had crafted for him, but she remained unfazed. "No matter. You're of no use on the battlefield anyway." "Ugh." Hearing the harsh truth, Draxler let out a sigh. "You're cruel as ever, Lady Beatrice. If you know that much already, you shouldn't have spoken ill of my magic tools in the first place." "My apologies." Draxler apologized with slumped shoulders, looking like a defeated loser, trying to stay on Beatrice's good side. She gave him a faint smile. "You'll have to work very hard from now on if you truly want to apologize." "I'll do my best," Draxler replied with a blank face. He already knew Beatrice would work him to the bone anyway, so it didn't really matter. As the two of them ventured deeper into the dark cave, Draxler gradually became more and more serious. "Did we really manage to catch his attention?" Draxler asked cautiously, and Beatrice answered calmly. "Yes, that's the very reason I created the witches' game in the first place. We succeeded. He already appeared before me once." The moment she mentioned him, excitement clearly spread across Beatrice's face. She had finally obtained what she had long desired. Chapter 440. The Fourth Seat Awakens. 2. When I tried to kill those worthless servants, he appeared before me, stopping me in my tracks. There's no doubt it was him. That level of wave manipulation is something only someone of his caliber could perform. Beatrice still remembered every moment of that encounter, when she had nearly killed Gavid Lindman and Murgo. Just as she was about to strike, time froze around her, reality flipped upside down, and a tremendous force pressed down on her, rendering her unable to move. Hearing this, Draxler nodded. "Helmand is in complete chaos right now. The Great King, Agaroth, and the First Seat, the Red Moon Crimson, have been dormant for a long time, and have stepped away from the battlefield. As for the second seat, Agar's, he vanished after his defeat against one of the 7 supreme powers, which leaves Shadow King Vayne as the strongest active demon among the upper seats." Draxler paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts before continuing. "Vayne has always been a strange and reclusive demon who follows only her whims. She has no interest in leadership whatsoever, which left the 4th seat, Weskier, and the 5th seat, Marvas, to lead the upper demons. Since the top 3 had withdrawn from leadership for various reasons, the upper demons had split into 2 factions, one led by the 4th seat, Weskier, the Black faction, which included demons like Beatrice and Astaroth. The other followed the 5th seat, Marvas, the Red faction. Although they were part of the same hierarchy, the 2 forces were constantly at odds, their relationship tangled and strained. Weskier was cunning and calculating, often scheming from behind the scenes. Marvas, on the other hand, was the oldest among the 72 upper demons, a seasoned war general with vast experience. The struggle between these two forces had raged for years, especially after the higher ranks ignored them completely, leaving them free to wage their own wars. The power struggle was evenly matched, until the Red faction recently gained the upper hand after the sudden disappearance of the Black faction's leader, Weskier. This disappearance led Weskier's followers to search for him, their journey eventually leading them to Earth, the last place Weskier was seen. Realizing this, Draxler stared at Beatrice's back, unable to believe what they were about to face. "Is Lord Weskier really in this place?" Draxler asked, but before he could say another word, his mouth vanished without warning. Beatrice turned toward him, holding her magic staff in hand. "You talk too much, Draxler. You'd better control yourself before my hand slips further." With that threatening tone, Draxler realized his missing mouth was Beatrice's doing. He had no choice but to submit, understanding that he had crossed the line. Beatrice, however, was entirely certain of her actions. She had spent a long time planning the witch's game, all for one higher purpose: to draw Weskier's attention. His disappearance wasn't random. Beatrice knew him well. This wasn't the first time he had done something like this. The king's eye never moved without meaning. Every step he took was calculated, and his sudden vanishing could mean only one thing: he was preparing for something enormous. Beatrice had always been fascinated by the intricate schemes Weskier wove from the shadows. The witch's game was nothing but a cheap imitation of her supreme master's grand designs. That's why she wanted a front-row seat to the show the fourth seat was about to put on. She was certain it would be spectacular. As for Marvas and the Red faction, she wasn't concerned about them in the slightest. Once it was over, Weskier would deal with them easily. She was certain of it. At that moment, Beatrice cared about only one thing: meeting him, and that was why she had come here. "He led me here himself." It happened during the final battle against the elite class students. Back then, Beatrice had felt a subtle current guiding her toward somewhere far away. That was why she never activated her final magical trap, the one that would have annihilated Fry and his companions. A witch like her had already accounted for the possibility that Fry might break through her defenses, so she had prepared an automatic trap that would trigger even without her casting it. Meaning Frey's anti-magic would have been useless. I was guaranteed victory. The witch's game was designed that way from the start. Fry and his companions had zero chance of winning, unless some outside force intervened. Who could have predicted that Weskier himself would intervene on their behalf? In such a case, Beatrice had no choice but to yield. And at that moment, she realized they had ventured too deep into the cave, the darkness around them growing heavier and heavier, a darkness far from ordinary. It was said that those who reached the higher realms of the SSS rank possessed such overwhelming power that those below SS Plus couldn't even sense it. And so, Beatrice and Draxler stood frozen, unsettled beneath the crushing weight of the vast darkness that crept over their skin. Slowly, the shadows gathered and converged, taking the form of a colossal silhouette stretching across the cavern wall. It was a demonic shadow, its single crimson eye snapping open without warning, gazing straight into their very souls. That eye did not merely see their bodies. It pierced far deeper, laying bare their past, present, and future, holding their fate in its grasp. "The king's eye," Beatrice whispered, awestruck. Draxler dropped to his knees without hesitation, pressing his forehead to the ground. Beatrice followed, bowing deeply, her lips curling into an exhilarated smile despite herself. They sought to greet him, to honor him, yet his mere presence robbed them of their voices. They couldn't sense his power. But the pressure he radiated left no room for doubt. Then came that voice. Sweet, seductive, the very whisper that had lured countless beings into ruin. The fourth seat spoke. "Beatrice, one day your curiosity will be the death of you." Summoning all her strength, Beatrice managed to reply to her master. If death is the price to witness the masterpiece you've painted here, then so be it. Let death come, ever the sweet talker. The crimson I continued to fixate on them, as Weskier spoke from beyond the veil of shadow. Your little game was amusing to my eyes, so go ahead, say what's on your mind. I'll allow it. Those final words ignited a spark in Beatrice's eyes. Without thinking, she stepped forward, unable to contain her excitement. Your words are more than I deserve. But the shadow on the wall remained silent. And in that silence, she realized her flattery was meaningless here. So she cast aside her empty words and asked the question that had haunted her for so long. Forgive my boldness, my lord. But why go to such lengths to toy with a worthless species like humans? Fair question. In the distant past, there had been a mighty civilization. Highly organized, fiercely strong. Warriors so powerful that even the demons could not breach their defenses. With a population of 2 billion, they were all hardened fighters, a race whose might forced the demons to tread carefully. But in that age, Weskier vanished, only to reappear hidden within their ranks. From the shadows, he plotted and schemed, turning them against one another within mere years. They split into 2 warring factions, blinded by petty disputes, unable to see the truth before them. Thus began a catastrophic war. Blood flowed without end. That once unbreakable civilization crumbled overnight, reduced to a sea of corpses. With only a few well-placed whispers and a handful of masterful conspiracies, Weskier destroyed everything. 1 billion lives were lost in that war. And then, at the moment of one side's triumph, at the peak of their joy, Weskier appeared before them, snatching away their victory and replacing it with utter despair. He was a sadist who delighted in breaking souls, just as they thought they had won. As their joy reached its peak, he descended upon them, slaughtering the remaining billion himself in a massacre that scarred the world's darkest history. Weskier's dreadful reputation was born of acts like these. But humans were not like that civilization. They were far weaker. Unlike that ancient race who could repel the elite demons, Weskier alone could erase all of humanity from the face of the earth in less than a day. And yet he hadn't. So Beatrice could not help but ask herself, why? Why would the fourth seat, one of the mightiest beings in existence, bother hiding and manipulating such fragile creatures from behind the curtain? That was the answer she sought. You're clever, Beatrice, but your vision is far too narrow. Between Beatrice's violet demonic gaze and Weskier's crimson king's eye, the gap was vast. She had only glimpsed the surface, ignorant of the deeper currents beneath. There is far more beyond what your eyes can see. In the end, you are nothing but a pawn on this board, just like every human soul standing on this chessboard called Earth. The game had been in play for far longer than she realized, and whoever revealed their hand first would lose. Whether it was the one with the king's eye, or the one with the piercing blue eyes playing the opposite side. Or perhaps a third player, an uninvited guest in the game. Many eyes are watching this place. Even the king himself has shown interest. Beatrice could not hide her shock. And how could she not, when she heard that the demon king Agaroth, in all his unimaginable might, was watching them, here on Earth in this insignificant corner of the vast cosmos. You've always been a fine piece, Beatrice, so continue to play your part, but do not try to break out of your shell. After all, what good is a pawn if it tries to leave the board and confront the player himself? The end draws near. The schemes will be revealed, the plans exposed, the secrets laid bare, and this world will finally learn the true meaning of horror. With those final words, the shadow slowly faded away, leaving Beatrice in stunned silence. Not much time remains. Planet Earth stood on the verge of a decisive turning point in its long and tangled history. A turning point that could mark the end of a story woven from countless threads of fate, now wrapping tightly around the necks of its inhabitants. And among them all, Fry Starlight stood at the center of those tangled threads, gazing up at the sky, weary and worn by the storm of events surrounding him. Time remaining until the end of the final mission. One day,